Chapter 196. Just as Xia Qing was about to rush over and open the furnace for her, Emotienga finally stood up. The timing of opening the pill furnace at the end of alchemy was very particular. If the furnace was opened too early, the pill aura would disperse quickly, and the pill would be unstable. Even if the pill was formed, the medicinal efficacy would be reduced. However, if the furnace was opened too late, it wouldn't work either. If too much of the pill fire was sealed in the pill, it would form pill poison and affect the quality of the pill. If the furnace was opened too early or too late, the pills would not be formed. Therefore, a brilliant alchemist must control the opening time of the furnace, not too early nor too late, so that the medicinal effect of the pill would be the highest, and at the same time, try to avoid the pill poison as much as possible. This was not something that was easy to grasp. Even an alchemy grandmaster would make mistakes sometimes. Other than concocting more pills and trying to figure it out, there was no other way. Right at this moment, Emotienga was concentrating her senses. All of a sudden she made her move. A wisp of spiritual aura flew out and rolled up the lid of the pill furnace. Hot steam spread out, and a sweet fragrance filled the air. There were a few medicinal pills lying at the bottom of the furnace. The color was clear and each one was plump. Emotienga heaved a sigh of relief. Actually, with her skill in alchemy, it was still impossible for her to refine soul-solidifying pills every time she refined them. When she was at her worst, she had refined 10 pills in a single furnace, but not a single one was successfully refined. This was the record she had in the 5 years she had been in seclusion. She didn't expect that all 5 of them would become pills this time. She thought that there would be at least 2 that failed. After that, she didn't need to do anything as Xia Qing had already done it for her. Xia Qing pounced over and grabbed the pills at the bottom of the furnace. She touched and smelled them, and in the end, she even scraped off some powder and tasted it. Upon seeing Emotienga's appearance, Emotion suddenly felt very sympathetic towards the cultivator who would take these medicinal pills in the future. It should be one of the 3 core formation cultivators from Bishuan Court, right? It wasn't easy for them either. The pills they took might have been tasted by someone else. Xia Qing grabbed Emotienga and anxiously shouted, "Fellow Taoist, teach me. Teach me. You're too amazing. You refine these pills much better than me. Look at the quality, look at the luster." Ever since she set foot on the path to immortality, Emotienga had seen many female cultivators. Among them, there were naive female cultivators like Morong Yen, lively female cultivators like Luo Fengxue, amiable female cultivators like Han Qingyu, cold and arrogant female cultivators like Wei Jiasi, and even many female cultivators who were as vain as mortal women. However, he had never seen someone like Xia Qing, who was so focused on one thing and so fanatical that she didn't care about anything else. She considered herself to be a cultivation maniac. Other than cultivating, refining pills, and studying array books, she had no interest in anything else. However, she was still a normal cultivator. She was good at scheming. She was definitely not like Xia Qing, who was slovenly and didn't care about the ways of the world, wholeheartedly pursuing the realm of pill concocting. Such a madman was rare even among male cultivators. She had never seen such a person before. Fortunately, Wei Haolan was still present. She pulled Xia Qing back and scolded, "Junior Martial Sister Xia, aren't you afraid of scaring fellow Taoist? If you want to learn from her, we can just ask her to stay for a few more days. What's the rush?" "Oh right." Xia Qing finally regained her composure. She hastily apologized to Emotienga. "Fellow Taoist, I'm sorry. I was too anxious." "It's nothing. I understand." Emotienga's gaze fell on Wei Haolan. "Sect Head Wei, can we conclude the matter we discussed before?" Seeing Xia Qing's reaction, Emotienga felt she could take the initiative now. Bishuan Court held the only transporting formation, but she also had the pill concocting technique that Bishuan Court urgently needed. Everyone took what they needed. Wei Haolan's expression calmed down when they talked about proper business. She glanced at Xia Qing and said with a smile, "Of course. Fellow Taoist, how about we go and have a proper talk now?" Emotienga understood and nodded. "That'd be best." The two of them were about to leave together when Xiaqing pounced on them from behind. Senior Martial Sister Sect Head, you can't take fellow Taoist Yi away. Xiaqing immediately pulled Emotinga behind her. Xiaqing glared at Wei Haolan like a hen protecting its chicks. Emotinga and Wei Haolan couldn't help but laugh. In the end, Wei Haolan comforted her. Junior Martial Sister Xia, rest assured. I'm looking for fellow Taoist Yi because I want her to teach you pill concocting. If you want to learn fellow Taoist Yi's pill concocting technique, don't cause trouble. Really? Xiaqing's eyes were filled with suspicion. She looked at Wei Haolan, then turned to look at Emotinga. She then shook her head and said, Senior Martial Sister Sect Head, this isn't the first time you've schemed against me. This time Emotinga snickered. Aside from pill concocting, there was nothing else in Xiaqing's eyes. Emotinga could also guess Wei Haolan's temperament. Wei Haolan most likely put the sex interests first. In that case, Emotinga wouldn't believe Wei Haolan hadn't schemed against Xiaqing. Wei Haolan sighed and said, Junior Martial Sister Xia, I schemed against you in the past, but when did I ever not support you in improving your pill concocting technique? Since fellow Taoist Yi is beneficial to your pill concocting technique, I naturally won't let her go. Xiaqing thought for a moment then nodded hesitantly. All right. You're the Senior Martial Sister Sect Head, so I'll listen to you. She then patted Emotinga's shoulder. Fellow Taoist Yi, don't run away. Let's compare notes first. Whatever you want, I'll ask Martial Uncle Chingy to give it to you. I guarantee you won't lose anything. Emotinga nodded. Fellow Taoist Xia, rest assured. If your Senior Martial Sister agrees to help me, I'll definitely tell you all my pill concocting tricks. That's good. Upon hearing what Emotinga said, Xiaqing once again said to Wei Haolan in a daze, Senior Martial Sister, just agree to fellow Taoist Yi's request. Great concocting masters aren't easy to find. Even if you find one, they never tell anyone about their tricks, so I can't learn them. Wei Haolan felt a headache coming on. She nodded and said, I understand. You can go back now. Only then did Xiaqing let go of Emotinga. Emotinga smiled, and once again cupped her hands to bid her farewell. With great difficulty, she held back her laughter, and left with Wei Haolan. The two of them didn't talk on the way. After walking for a short while, Wei Haolan once again led Emotinga back to the main hall. She then ordered the part-time disciples to serve tea again, and dismissed everyone else, leaving only the two of them in the hall. Ahem. Wei Haolan coughed then glanced at Emotinga. Fellow Taoist Yi, since my junior martial sister already said so, I won't hide it anymore. If you want to borrow the transporting formation, that's no problem. As long as you teach my junior martial sister everything you know about concocting pills, you can come and go as you please. This time, Emotinga wasn't in a hurry. She slowly sipped her tea then said, Fellow Taoist Wei, for concocting masters, some things are secrets that can't be passed on. If I teach her everything, shouldn't you add a bit more bargaining chip? This isn't just 2,000 spirit stones. Even if you have spirit stones, you still can't buy the pill concocting secrets. Wei Haolan's expression darkened. Fellow Taoist Yi, do you want to raise the price? I wouldn't dare. Emotinga smiled faintly. I'm not someone who doesn't know how to appreciate favors. We've already reached a preliminary agreement before, but I just want to improve it a bit. Wei Haolan's expression finally became a bit better. All right. If fellow Taoist Yi has any other requests, please don't hesitate to mention them. As the sect head, I can still make the decision. Sect head Wei is straightforward. Emotinga clapped her hands. Wei Haolan forced a smile. Fellow Taoist Yi, please state your conditions first. Emotinga didn't speak right away. Instead, she muttered to herself for a moment. In fact, a small, remote cultivation group like Bishuan Court originally didn't have anything that could make her covet it. She had spirit stones. Although she wasn't as rich as the child of wealth, she had more than ordinary core formation cultivators. There was no need to mention medicinal pills. She had as many as she wanted right now. She also didn't lack magic tools. She even had several magic weapons, and 2 late-stage foundation-building puppets. Presumably, there weren't many foundation-building cultivators who had as many treasures as she did. As for materials, this was the Eastern Sea region. Wei Haolan had long said that cultivation resources were scarce here. Sect head Wei, to be honest, I don't need spirit stones or other items. I just need your group to provide me with one thing. Oh, Wei Haolan was puzzled. Aside from spirit stones and other items related to cultivation, what else did cultivators need? Safe, Emotinga said faintly. To tell the truth, sect head Wei, I was transported here together with an enemy. Although we weren't transported together, I'm not sure that person didn't arrive in Linhai. Wei Haolan's expression turned stern. Enemy? Fellow Taoist Yi. What's the cultivation level of your enemy? Right now he should be in the early stage of the core formation realm. He's a devil cultivator. The early stage of the core formation realm. Wei Haolan muttered to herself for a moment. She didn't ask how Emotinga became his enemy. Instead she said faintly, if that's the case, fellow Taoist Yi can rest assured. As long as you don't leave Bishuan Court, I can guarantee your safety. Does that mean sect head Wei can guarantee my safety when I leave Linhai and return to Kunwu? As long as fellow Taoist Yi doesn't leave at will, there won't be any problem with us 3 core formation elders here. Emotinga smiled. Alright. Since sect head Wei is straightforward, I'll also be straightforward. As long as your group guarantees my safety and allows me to smoothly use the transporting formation to return to Kunwu, I'll teach you everything I know about pill concocting without holding anything back. Hearing those words, Wei Haolan finally revealed a smile. Very well, then it's decided. Emotinga nodded. The two of them clapped their hands to make their vow. Using tea as a substitute for wine, they each drank a cup to signify that they'd reached an agreement. Now that they were done talking about business, Wei Haolan finally seemed to have the mood to relax. She slowly examined Emotinga, then asked with a smile. Fellow Taoist Ye's appearance doesn't seem to be due to the effects of look-preserving pills. Presumably, you're also very young, right? In fact, Emotinga had also taken look-preserving pills. However, based on the lifespan of foundation-building cultivators, she hadn't reached the age of aging, so she still had a sense of youthfulness to her. This was something cultivators who had taken look-preserving pills didn't have. Emotinga just said faintly, I only have my current cultivation level because my elders think highly of me. Although she didn't directly admit it, Wei Haolan understood what she meant. Fellow Taoist Ye's really young and promising. You're worthy of being a disciple of a big cultivation group. Emotinga smiled but didn't say anything. If this kind of conversation continued, it would turn into mutual flattery. She wasn't used to that. Since Wei Haolan was the head of a cultivation group, she was naturally shrewd. Upon seeing Emotinga's expression, she said, Fellow Taoist, you must be tired after concocting medicinal pills, right? We're not in a hurry to teach you pill concocting. How about I arrange for fellow Taoist you to rest first? Emotinga was indeed tired, so she took advantage of the situation and said, Alright, I'll have to trouble sect head Wei. Wei Haolan waved her hand, then raised her voice to call out, Guards! The 2 aura-refining female cultivators guarding the door stepped in, then bowed. Sect head, what are your orders? Wei Haolan's expression changed when she faced her disciples. She was solemn and imposing. From today onward, Senior Yi will live in the VIP building. From now on, the 2 of you will serve Senior Yi. You mustn't neglect her in the slightest, understand? Upon hearing the sect head's solemn instructions, the 2 aura-refining cultivators didn't dare to be disrespectful. They hastily bowed and said, Disciple understands. Wei Haolan nodded. That'll do. You can go now. Yes. After answering, the 2 female cultivators respectfully bowed towards Emotinga. Senior Yi, please follow Junior. Chapter 197. From then on, Emotinga stayed at Bishuan Court. Although Wei Haolan was quite scheming, she still treated Emotinga quite well. Not only did she send 2 female cultivators to take care of Emotinga's daily chores, but she also gave Emotinga a lot of Eastern Sea specialties, such as spiritual fruits and other things for her to enjoy. On the second day after Emotinga stayed at Bishuan Court's VIP building, there was a continuous stream of guests. Xiaqing was always there. Early in the morning, she dragged Emotinga to the concocting room and asked her about pill concocting. When Emotinga returned from the concocting room, there were always other guests waiting for her. These guests were all Bishuan Court's foundation building female cultivators. When she asked why, they all said they heard Emotienga came from Kunwu, so they wanted to inquire about Kunwu and exchange some things with her. Although Linhai was lacking in cultivation materials, it was still close to the Eastern Sea, so there were some special items in the sea that couldn't be found on land. These things weren't the main raw materials for medicinal pills, but they had special effects. Reportedly, these Bishuan Court disciples only had a few chances to be sent to Kunwu, or the Heartland, to exchange for materials. Most of them wouldn't get the chance to go to Kunwu in their entire lives. So even if they obtained some materials that were rare for cultivators on land, they could only keep them in their hands. Now that they heard there were fellow cultivators from Kunwu, they all took out the things they had and came to exchange them for medicinal pills, spiritual plants, magic tools, and so on. Emotienga didn't lack medicinal pills, and she also had a lot of magic tools. Although she wasn't a bloodthirsty person, many cultivators died around her since the demonic beast riot began. Some were killed by her, and some died because they were unlucky. She obtained a lot of magic tools from those unlucky cultivators, but she usually didn't lack spirit stones, so she didn't exchange them for money. Now, she took them out and exchanged them for some strange materials with these female cultivators. Of course, she wouldn't take out the things she obtained from Yenruoshu and the others. Senior Yi, Emotienga was cultivating when she suddenly heard a voice outside. She pressed the space between her eyebrows, came out of the virtual sky world, and opened the defensive formation. What's wrong? Outside were two female aura refining cultivators assigned by Wei Haolan to serve her. Their names were Yilu and Ichio, and they were a pair of sisters. In Bishuan Court, low-level male cultivators had to do some rather laborious and sporadic work. So this kind of personal work was usually done by the maids. Reportedly, Yilu and Ichio didn't have good spiritual roots, so they were taken in as maids in the beginning. Of course, in a cultivation group for female cultivators like Bishuan Court, their status was much higher than that of low-level male cultivators. The two sisters were diligent, and their job was to serve the sect leader. Wei Haolan saw that they were diligent and capable, so she often took care of them. Right now they were already in the 8th or 9th layer of the aura refining realm. If they could get their hands on a foundation-building pill, they might be able to reach the sky in a single bound. Emotienga recalled Anen, the little girl she met in the fishing village. If she was also as hardworking as Anen, her path towards immortality might not necessarily be hopeless. Upon hearing Emotienga's voice, Yilu came in. She bowed respectfully and said, "Senior Yi, the secret treasure pavilion is currently holding an exchange meeting. The sect master heard that Senior Yi often exchanges items with the martial uncles in the sect, so he specially sent someone to invite you." An exchange meeting? Emotienga was astonished. She'd naturally heard about the exchange meeting. In the cultivation world, aside from opening shops and setting up stalls, there were also exchanges and auctions. However, the latter was generally used by high-level cultivators. When a cultivator's cultivation level was high, the requirements for the spiritual objects they needed were also high. Ordinary shops were opened by low-level cultivators, so how could they possibly have these things? Therefore, some powerful shops would hold auctions to sell some rare materials at the best price. And the exchange meeting was also born because of this. However, Bishuan Court didn't have that many high-level cultivators, so it could be completely like Xianqing School. They could just set up a group shop and let their disciples buy and sell items. There was no need for an exchange meeting. But on second thought, Emotienga remembered that in Linhai, spiritual objects were scarce and high-level cultivators were few, so it wasn't strange for foundation-building cultivators to exchange some rare items among themselves. Senior Yi? Seeing that Emotienga didn't answer, Yilu called her again. Oh, Emotienga regained her train of thought. Then lead the way. While you're at it, tell me about this exchange meeting. Yes. After leading Emotienga out of the VIP building, Yilu said while leading the way, this exchange meeting is held every few months. Senior Yi also knows that Linhai doesn't have a lot of cultivation resources, especially medicinal pills. There aren't many good concoctions, masters. And we're also short on a lot of spiritual plants. Fortunately, we're near the Eastern Sea, and there are many demonic beasts in the sea. The beast cores of these demonic beasts can be taken directly, so beast cores can be taken directly. Emotienga interrupted Ilu and asked. Ilu nodded. Senior Yi, you don't know. However, taking beast cores requires some special methods to transform the spiritual aura inside. Moreover, different beast cores contain different spiritual auras, so you have to go to the exchange meeting to exchange for the beast cores you need. I see. Emotienga looked pensive. In Kunwu, beast cores had always been used to concoct medicinal pills. Every few decades during the demonic beast riots, the demonic beasts' corpses could be used to refine tools, and beast cores could be used to concoct medicinal pills. Beast cores contained a strange power, and if taken directly, it might lead to cultivation deviation. Even if it didn't happen, the spiritual aura inside the user's body would be contaminated with too many impurities. However, Emotienga didn't expect that Linhai actually had a method to transform beast cores directly. This was very valuable. She might be able to comprehend some new methods to use beast cores and better utilize their power. Senior Yi, we're here. Ilu led her to a building, then pointed at the attic and said, It's up there. Senior can just go up. Junior's cultivation level isn't high enough, so I can't accompany Senior. Emotienga nodded. Alright, thank you. I don't dare. Ilu bowed, then went to the side to stand with the disciples guarding the door. Emotienga went upstairs by herself. This attic was about the size of a side hall. There was a long table in the middle, and there were already about 20 cultivators sitting around it. All of them were in the foundation building realm, and there were even men and women among them. Emotienga was a bit surprised. Ever since she came to Bishuan Court, none of the male cultivators she'd seen were in the foundation building realm. Most of them were low-level cultivators in the second or third layer of the aura refining realm. Among the 20 or so foundation building cultivators in front of her, there were 5 or 6 male cultivators, which was indeed quite a lot. Emotienga thought about it. It wasn't like Bishuan Court didn't have male cultivators. She'd also heard that male cultivators with extraordinary aptitudes could be accepted as outer disciples. After they performed dual cultivation with female disciples, they could become official disciples. Seeing that these male cultivators all had relatively intimate female cultivators by their side, they must be these female cultivators' dual cultivation partners, right? Once Emotienga came up, Wei Haolan, who was sitting on the host's seat, immediately smiled and personally went to greet her. Fellow Taoist Yi, you're finally here. Emotienga smiled back, and even saluted Wei Haolan. She then turned around and saluted everyone. Upon seeing her salute, the cultivators sitting around the long table stood up one after another to return the salute. Wei Haolan pulled Emotienga's hand, then returned to the host's seat. She directly let Emotienga sit next to her, then said with a smile, Fellow Taoist Yi, you don't have to be so reserved. Everyone here today is Bishuan Court's disciples, so this is just an internal exchange gathering. She then turned towards everyone and said, Fellow disciples, this is fellow Taoist Yi from Kunwu. Fellow Taoist Yi is skilled in pill concocting, so if you have anything you want to exchange for, you must seize this opportunity. Everyone's gazes fell on Emotienga. A female cultivator even said with a smile, Fellow Taoist Yi, you mustn't be stingy today. We're all counting on your medicinal pills. During this period of time, Emotienga had seen quite a few Bishuan Court female cultivators. Most of them were here, so she recognized about 10 female cultivators present. She smiled and said, I've never been stingy. If fellow Taoists want to exchange for something, I definitely won't hide anything as long as I have it. Smiles appeared on everyone's faces when they heard what she said. If there was anything special about today's exchange gathering, it had to be fellow Taoist Yi from Kunwu. Everyone else was a Bishuan Court cultivator, so whatever they had was pretty much the same. However, this fellow Taoist Yi was a concocting master. No matter how good beast cores were, they still couldn't compare to medicinal pills of the same rank. At that moment, Everyone started to calculate what they had to exchange for medicinal pills, and how many they could exchange for. Wei Haolan swept her gaze over everyone then said, "All right, almost everyone's here. Let's start." Upon hearing her voice, everyone who was still talking quieted down. Wei Haolan said with a faint smile, "According to the rules, we usually take turns from left to right. But today we have an honored guest, so let's start with the honored guest. Does anyone have any objections?" Most of the people in this exchange gathering came for Emotienga, so how could they have any objections? Right now, several dozen pairs of eyes were staring at Emotienga. Seeing this situation, Wei Haolan smiled again. "It seems everyone has no objections. It's settled then. Let's start with fellow Taoist Yi." She then turned to Emotienga and said, "Fellow Taoist Yi, you also know we all want to exchange medicinal pills with you. How many medicinal pills do you have to exchange?" Emotienga thought for a moment, then started to take medicinal pills out of her Qingquan bag. As she put the jade bottles on the table one by one, the cultivator's eyes became brighter and brighter. After taking out about a dozen jade bottles, Emotienga stopped. "These are probably all I have. A few days ago, fellow Taoists exchanged for quite a lot, so these were concocted by me on the spot." Even Wei Haolan's eyes brightened when she saw more than a dozen bottles of medicinal pills. Even in Kunwu, medicinal pills weren't cheap. Every year, they sent disciples out to purchase medicinal pills, but there weren't many foundation-building cultivators who used them. "Fellow Taoist Yi," someone couldn't help but ask, "What are these medicinal pills?" Emotienga opened the bottles one by one. "These are spirit-cleansing pills. These are restorative panaceas. These are heart-clearing pills. These are look-preserving pills. And the rest are soul-strengthening pills. They're all medicinal pills that foundation-building cultivators can take." She concocted these medicinal pills using the common spiritual plants she bought from Xianqing School's shop. Her previous talk about concocting medicinal pills on the spot was for these cultivators to hear. She was only a foundation-building cultivator. Even if she came from a famous cultivation group and had pill concocting skills, it wouldn't be appropriate for her to take out too many medicinal pills. In particular, the materials she took from her virtual sky world couldn't be taken out to exchange with others. However, this many medicinal pills were already enough for the Bishuan court disciples trapped in Linhai. "Fellow Taoist Yi, what do you want to exchange for?" Right after she finished speaking, someone immediately called out impatiently and took out a pile of things. "Look, I have all kinds of beast cores and some special spiritual objects from the Eastern Sea. Is there anything you want?" Emotienga smiled and said, "I'm fine with anything, but I only have these medicinal pills. I'm afraid they're not enough for everyone to exchange for." "That's nothing," Wei Haolan interrupted. "Fellow Taoist Yi, roughly how many medicinal pills do you have?" Emotienga made a rough estimate. There were about 10 to 50 medicinal pills in each bottle. "About 300. Then let's make an agreement. Martial sisters and junior martial sisters can exchange for 10 medicinal pills at most. What do you think?" There were more than 20 people present, so if each person received 10 medicinal pills, they could pretty much exchange all the medicinal pills they had. Everyone had their own calculations, and most of them agreed. However, there were also some people who had objections. "What if there are more?" Wei Haolan smiled and said, "If there are more, I'll exchange them on behalf of the group and distribute them to you. What do you think?" Chapter 198. After Wei Haolan made her decision, none of the foundation establishment cultivators had any objections, so the matter was settled. These cultivators' main purpose was naturally to exchange for soul-strengthening pills, which could be used to increase the cultivation of foundation establishment cultivators. Therefore, Wei Haolan first confirmed the number of soul-strengthening pills and distributed them to the cultivators present. The other restorative spirit pills and purifying spirit pills were also indispensable, but if there weren't enough monster core materials, then they could only give their quota to other cultivators. Originally, look-preserving pills were considered medicinal pills that weren't too popular in shops or in exchange fairs, but Bishuan Court's situation was special. There were about 20 female cultivators present, and they didn't have many look-preserving techniques to begin with, so nearly 30 look-preserving pills were instantly snatched away. There were even 2 female cultivators who started quarreling over a single medicinal pill. "Shut up!" Wei Haolan shouted when she saw this. Mo Tiange could see that Wei Haolan had quite a bit of prestige in the school. Although there were female cultivators whose cultivation levels weren't inferior to hers, they all quieted down the moment they heard her shout. Wei Haolan furrowed her brows slightly and said, "Junior Martial Sisters, if all of you want the beauty pill, then let Junior Martial Sister Xiaqing learn the refining method from fellow Taoist Yi. When the time comes, you can exchange for it yourselves if you want it." This was indeed a solution to the root of the problem. The materials needed to concoct look-preserving pills that could preserve one's appearance for 10 years weren't considered rare. In Kunwu, even aura refining cultivators who came from a cultivation group or clan could still afford it. If Xiaqing learned the concoction method, Bishuang Court would send people out every year to exchange for the materials. At that time, they could concoct several dozen pills and distribute them among their disciples. After hearing Wei Haolan's words, the 2 female cultivators were finally convinced. Finally, the medicinal pill was exchanged for by the other female cultivator. In the end, Mo Tiange already had a pile of strange materials in her hands. Among them, the most numerous were beast cores, which were colorful and had all kinds of attributes. Sadly, the highest level they had was only a 4th rank Yao Dan. After all, a 5th rank Yao Dan was equivalent to a completion stage cultivator. They were only at the foundational stage, so killing a 5th rank Yao Dan was not easy. After exchanging the last bottle of medicinal pills, Mo Tiange was finally done. Just as she was about to heave a sigh of relief, she suddenly heard hurried footsteps coming from the stairs. It seemed like someone was running up the stairs in a hurry. Wei Haolan frowned in displeasure. Then, a white-clothed youth in the early stage of foundation establishment appeared at the door. "I'm sorry." The man stood at the door, his fair face flushed. "I'm late." Mo Tiange cast a glance at this person and was secretly shocked. Although she had never seen him before, she recognized him. More than a year ago, inside Wanderer Ziwei's Immortal's Cave, the 2 female cultivators, Yin and Lu, were both trapped in the illusory formation. At that time, the one who appeared was exactly this white-robed male cultivator. She remembered that the 2 of them called the phantom Big Brother Tang. Almost all the female cultivators present had smiles on their faces when they saw this person. Only Wei Haolan's expression was slightly more serious, but she only coughed and said, "Junior Martial Brother Tang, why are you so late? Fellow Taoist Ye's medicinal pills have all been exchanged." The male cultivator was dumbfounded. His gaze shifted to Mo Tiange, who was standing next to Wei Haolan. He was at a loss as to what to do. "Es done changing?" This time, the one who spoke was one of the male cultivators who rarely spoke before. His tone was ice-cold. "Junior Martial Brother Tang, you're really leisurely. Sect head said before that the exchange meet must be punctual, but you're already 2 hours late. I have something to do." That person walked towards her in a somewhat awkward manner. Before he could say anything, he saw a female cultivator stand up and say, "Junior Martial Brother Tang, I exchanged a lot of medicinal pills. I'll give you some." Before Junior Martial Brother Tang could answer, another female cultivator said, "Senior Martial Sister Lu, you didn't exchange a lot, right? If you give more, you won't have any left." She then turned towards that person and said with a smile, "Big Brother Tang, what were you busy with? There's no need to worry about medicinal pills. I exchanged a few more, so I'll give you half." This female cultivator didn't seem very old, and the way she addressed him was the same as Yin and Lu. Right after she finished speaking, a third female cultivator said, "Junior Martial Brother Tang, you should exchange with me. Although I don't have enough medicinal pills, I still have a lot of metal element beast cores. Presumably, Junior Martial Brother Tang needs them." Senior Martial Sister Yang, the youngest female cultivator, raised her eyebrows and shouted, "Who wants your beast cores? We're all here for medicinal pills at today's exchange meet. Big Brother Tang, it's a deal. In a moment, we'll discuss how to exchange medicinal pills." Humph. The third female cultivator didn't have a good temper. When she heard this, she flipped her hand, pulled out a crescent moon-shaped blade-shaped magic tool from her waist, and slammed it on the table. Junior Marshal Sister Hua. It's up to Junior Marshal Brother Tang to decide whether he wants the beast cores or not. You don't need to refuse on his behalf. This Junior Marshal Sister Hua was probably used to being arrogant. When she heard this, she didn't say anything else, and also pulled out a flying sword from her waist. Senior Marshal Sister Yang, I'm giving you face. If Big Brother Tang refuses you, you'll lose face. You. Enough. Wei Haolan finally shouted. There's an honored guest here. So how can you act like this? You don't need to worry about Junior Marshal Brother Tang's medicinal pills. Just now, we used the sect's name to exchange them for Junior Marshal Brother Tang. Senior Marshal Sister Wei. Unexpectedly, Wei Haolan's words didn't have any effect this time. Junior Marshal Sister Hua didn't admit defeat at all. She scowled and said, You're abusing your position for personal gain. You're using the sect's medicinal pills as a favor. Wei Haolan's expression turned cold when she heard this. At that moment, Senior Marshal Sister Yang interjected. Senior Marshal Sister Sect Head is the sect head. What's wrong with making this decision? Junior Marshal Sister Hua, aren't you meddling too much? You're not Junior Marshal Brother Tang's dual cultivation wife. You also don't have a share. Once she said that, Junior Marshal Sister Hua flew into a rage. It's not up to you to decide whether I have a share or not. It's up to Big Brother Tang himself to decide. Right, it's up to him to decide. Junior Marshal Sister Hua, you're so fierce. Yet you still want Junior Marshal Brother Tang to take a fancy to you? Don't worry. Mo Tiange watched the lively scene in silence. She originally thought Bishuan Court's female cultivators were much better than the jealous and ostentatious women outside, but it seemed it also depended on who they were. Today really broadened her horizons. There were actually people who quarreled like this because of a man. It seemed not only beautiful women were trouble, but beautiful men were also trouble. With that thought in mind, she cast a glance at the stunned white-robed male cultivator. His face was handsome enough, but his blank expression and bewildered look couldn't compare to Qin she's bearing in the slightest. She really didn't know what these female cultivators saw in him. Being handsome wasn't enough for a man. Temperament and demeanor were more important. Take Qin Shi for example. He wasn't earth-shattering handsome, but his bearing was magnificent and outstanding. He was many times better than this Junior Marshal Brother Tang. All of you shut up. Wei Haolan's shout startled Mo Tiange back to her senses. She realized what she was thinking, so she felt vexed. She quickly restrained her thoughts and stopped letting her imagination run wild. Wei Haolan was obviously enraged. Her cold gaze swept over the several cultivators in front of her, and her expression darkened. Look at what you're doing. If you still have me, the sect head, in your eyes, shut up. You. Junior Marshal Sister Hua seemed to want to say something, but Wei Haolan didn't look like she was joking. In the end, she reluctantly shut her mouth and sat back down. Wei Haolan looked at Junior Marshal Brother Tang with a cold gaze. Junior Marshal Brother Tang, since you're late, I won't give you the medicinal pills. Yes, Junior Marshal Brother Tang answered in a low voice. Mo Tiange thought inwardly, even if Wei Haolan didn't give it to him, there would naturally be others who would be willing to exchange for it, right? This method was useless against this popular Junior Marshal Brother Tang. That'll do. Wei Haolan's expression softened. You can exchange freely now. Upon hearing what she said, the atmosphere finally relaxed. The more than 20 cultivators gathered together and whispered to each other. Wei Haolan turned around and forced a smile at Mo Tiange. Fellow Taoist Yi, please forgive us for our lack of discipline. Mo Tiange smiled faintly and said carelessly, Sect headway doesn't need to mind. I've seen this kind of thing many times in Kunwu. It's nothing. Really? Wei Haolan didn't seem to be in the mood to chat today. She said, Now's the time to exchange freely, so I won't take up any more of fellow Taoists' time. Fellow Taoist, please help yourself. I still have something to do, so I'll take my leave first. Mo Tiange nodded. Sect headway please. Wei Haolan smiled then hurriedly stood up and left. As soon as Wei Haolan left, Someone immediately went to look for Emotienga. It was Junior Marshall's sister Hua. Fellow Taoist Yi. Emotienga was displeased by this woman's domineering behavior, but her expression remained indifferent. Fellow Taoist, what's the matter? Junior Marshall's sister Hua's eyes moved around, as if she was observing whether other people were looking at them. She then asked in a low voice, Fellow Taoist Yi, you must have more medicinal pills, right? How about I add a few more things in exchange for them? If fellow Taoist doesn't want to exchange with other people, I can give you twice the amount of beast cores. Emotienga wrinkled her brows slightly but didn't answer. Seeing that Emotienga didn't answer, Junior Marshall's sister Hua added, Fellow Taoist Yi, I'm the blood-related descendant of Elder Qingmiao from my group. If you're willing to exchange with me, I'll put in a good word for you in front of my clan's ancestor. At that time, when my ancestor sees you, he might be happy and reward you with good things. At first, Emotienga didn't think much of it, but when she heard what she said, she couldn't help but laugh in her heart. If she was an individual cultivator, she probably wouldn't give up the opportunity to make friends with a core formation cultivator. However, she clearly said she was a Xianqing school disciple who left the mountain to travel under her master's orders. Did an elite disciple of Xianqing school need to curry favor with a core formation cultivator from a small cultivation group like Bishuan Court? It seemed this Junior Marshall's sister, Hua, really had a backer, so she didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Emotienga's wealth wasn't inferior to that of ordinary core formation cultivators, but based on her pill concocting skills alone, she was able to take out more than 10 bottles of medicinal pills at once. This Bishuan court elder most likely still wanted to make friends with her. Fellow Taoist Yi. Seeing that Emotienga still didn't answer, Junior Marshall's sister Hua raised her brows and said in annoyance, I'm willing to give you more beast cores. Don't refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. Emotienga just cast a careless glance at her, as if she didn't take what Junior Marshall's sister Hua said seriously. Fellow Taoist, you're thinking too much. I already said I only have this many medicinal pills. Even if I wanted to trade, I wouldn't be able to take them out. You. Junior Marshall's sister Hua was furious. She obviously didn't believe Emotienga, but in the end, she was still unwilling to give up, so she threatened, You better think it through. Emotienga's tone was still indifferent. I really don't have any. Even if I wanted to trade, I wouldn't be able to. Emotienga wasn't worried at all about this unruly young Mrs. Words. Previously, Emotienga wasn't sure, but now that she had seen the internal situation of Bishuan Court, she was very clear that with her pill concocting skills, she didn't have to worry about Bishuan Court going back on their word. Besides, Wei Haolan didn't take this young Mrs. Word seriously, so what was there for her to be afraid of? Chapter 199. Following that, Emotienga continued to exchange some Kunwa spiritual plants for beast core materials, among which there was no lack of good stuff. In the end, that unruly young lady surnamed Hua didn't bother her, but she sat on the side with an unhappy expression and glared at her from time to time. Emotienga turned a blind eye to her. She wasn't a childish person, so how could she have the leisure to argue with a young lady who hadn't seen the world? Sure enough, there were female cultivators who were willing to exchange medicinal pills with that Junior Marshall brother Tang. Emotienga noticed that the medicinal pills he exchanged for were actually more than the others, so much so that the other male cultivators looked unhappy. But there was nothing she could do about it. Who told him to be so charming? Before long, the exchange party was finally over. Emotienga bid farewell to several female cultivators she was familiar with, then went down the loft. Ilu was waiting for her downstairs. When she saw her, she came over and saluted her. Senior Yi, Emotienga said, let's go back. Yes, Ilu answered and continued to lead the way. Emotienga stared at Ilu and suddenly asked, Is there a foundation building cultivator surnamed Tang in your school? Ilu turned her head and answered, Senior Yi, Tang is my school's Grandmaster Qingxi's surname, so there are many cultivators surnamed Tang in my school. May I know which one Senior Yi is talking about? Oh, could it be that Junior Marshall brother Tang is related to Elder Qingxi? I'm talking about a male cultivator in the early stage of the foundation building realm. He came in 2 hours late to the exchange party just now. Yilu paused, looked at her cautiously and said, Senior Yi, you're talking about Martial Uncle Tang Shen, right? Martial Uncle Tang is Grandmaster Qingxi's great-great-grandson. I see. It was no wonder that although this person was a male cultivator, his status wasn't low. Those female cultivators who called him Big Brother Tang must also have a family background, right? Doesn't he have a dual cultivation partner? Yilu looked at her cautiously and said after some deliberation, Senior Yi, Martial Uncle Tang currently doesn't have a dual cultivation partner. However, his marriage has been discussed, but it hasn't been decided yet. Upon seeing Immerse's reaction, Immerse knew Yilu had misunderstood. However, she didn't explain, and just nodded to show she understood. Yilu thought for a moment. She still seemed a little worried, so she said, Our Grandmaster Qingxi really likes Martial Uncle Tang. Martial Uncle Tang grew up with Grandmaster Qingxi. So even though he's a male cultivator, his status in the group is very high. Immerse could see this even if she didn't have eyes. She smiled and asked, Are there many people who like him? Yilu was somewhat startled by this straightforward question. She paused for a moment before nodding. Yes, Martial Uncle Tang. He's handsome, and he's also Grandmaster Qingxi's favorite junior. Who wouldn't like him? This reason, Immerse had to admit that although it was superficial, it was also the truth. There were also a lot of female disciples in Xianqing school who liked senior martial brother Shoujing. Didn't many of them also like him for the same reason? However, when she saw Yilu's blushing face, she asked curiously, Are you the same? Yilu was stunned by his question. She hurriedly looked left and right before saying in a low voice, Senior Yi, don't talk nonsense. Because of Martial Uncle Tang's dual cultivation, the martial uncles in the sect often fight each other. You'll get me killed if you say that. Often fight each other? Immerse couldn't help but be surprised. She didn't find it strange that these women fought each other at the exchange gathering, but it was strange that they fought each other often. Could it be that their elders didn't care? Yes. Perhaps this topic aroused Yilu's interest in talking. She carefully looked around and said, There are a lot of martial uncles under the 3 grandmasters who like Martial Uncle Tang. There's Martial Uncle Yang and Martial Uncle, when under Grandmaster Qingxi, Martial Uncle Hua, Martial Uncle Ming, and Martial Uncle Yin under Grandmaster Qingmiao, and Martial Uncle Lu under Grandmaster Qingyi. These are the ones who fight quite fiercely. There are also many who don't fight too fiercely. There's nothing we can do about it. There are very few high-level male cultivators in Linhai, and there are even fewer handsome ones. Upon hearing the 2 surnames Yin and Lu, Immerse's gaze flickered. So these 2 people are Qingmiao and Qingyi's disciples? But this had nothing to do with her. She already planned to bury this matter in her heart and pretend she never knew about it. Senior Yi, seeing that Immerse's gaze was wandering, as if she was thinking about something, Yilu stammered. Immerse was absent-minded. Biting her lip, Yilu finally made up her mind and said, You'd better not meddle in Martial Uncle Tang's business. You're a cultivator from Kunwu, so the Grandmasters definitely won't let Martial Uncle Tang go with an outsider. Immerse was stunned, but she couldn't help but laugh. Did Yilu also think she admired that Tang Shen? Although she had to admit that Tang Shen's appearance wasn't inferior to Qin Shi's, appearance didn't mean everything. Rest assured, I don't have any other intentions. By the time she finished speaking, they had arrived at the VIP building, so she didn't say anything more and went inside. There were still some part-time disciples in the VIP building who did menial work. Yilu looked at them, then stopped talking and followed Immerse inside. Senior Yi, is there anything else? Yilu hesitated for a moment, then asked, Senior Yi, I heard your pill concocting skills are very brilliant. I want to ask. Senior, we want to exchange some things for medicinal pills. Is that possible? Immerse said, I don't have any foundation building medicinal pills left, but if you want ore refining medicinal pills, I still have some. Really? Yilu was overjoyed. Senior Yi, we only need ore refining medicinal pills. I have beast cores, spirit stones, and these. Knowing she still had medicinal pills, Ilu hastily pulled off the chinkuan bag on her waist. After rummaging through a few things, she said, "Oh, senior, wait a moment. Ichio still has some." She then ran out excitedly without waiting for Emotienga's answer. Emotienga shook her head with a smile, then laid a defensive formation again. She had to be careful when she was outside, especially when the people around her had ulterior motives. She had always been very careful. She made the people of Bichuan Court think she was useful, but she also didn't want to be useful to the point where they wanted to imprison her. However, she couldn't be careless, so she couldn't lack defensive formations. Before long, Ilu hurriedly ran back while pulling Ichio along. Both of them looked very happy. Once Ichio arrived, she also took out her chinkuan bag and took out several kinds of things. "Senior Yi, please take a look. Can I exchange these for medicinal pills?" Emotienga gave them a cursory glance. Each of them had 1 or 200 spirit stones, several first-rank beast cores, and some scattered materials. In the end, they were aura-refining cultivators. The things they could take out were far inferior to those of foundation-building cultivators. Thinking Emotienga was dissatisfied, Ilu said somewhat shyly, "Senior Yi, our cultivation levels are low, so we can't get anything good. We saved these spirit stones for a long time." Emotienga looked up with a smile, interrupting her. "All right, I'll exchange with you." She took out 4 jade bottles from her chinkuan bag. These 2 bottles contain aura-nourishing pills, which aura-refining cultivators usually take. There are 30 pills in each bottle. These 2 bottles contain aura-converging pills, which are 10 times more effective than aura-nourishing pills. There are 10 pills in each bottle. The 4 jade bottles were placed on the table. Ilu and Ichio were overjoyed. According to the price in Kunwu, these things were worth 5 or 600 spirit stones. Medicinal pills were even more difficult to obtain in Linhai, so they were worth far more. After taking the medicinal pills, they couldn't wait to open them and take a look. The 2 of them thanked Emotienga repeatedly. "Thank you for your reward, Senior Yi." They naturally knew that the spirit stones and medicinal pills they gave were far less than the value of these medicinal pills. "No need to thank me. Just take it as a reward for taking care of my chores these past few days." Emotienga never thought she could get anything from these 2 female aura-refining cultivators. In any case, these were just leftovers from when she concocted medicinal pills for Jinji. Thinking of Jinji, she was in a daze for a while. By now, Jinji should have returned to Mount Taikong and finished the foundation-building pill test, right? She didn't know whether he passed or not. If he did, he should have entered closed-door meditation to build his foundation. She wasn't worried that Jinji wouldn't succeed. It was very rare for ordinary cultivators to succeed in building their foundation on the first try. With that master of hers watching over him, even if he didn't succeed, nothing would happen. Moreover, before she left, she secretly prepared several foundation-building pills and constitution-enhancing pills for Jinji, which she put in another small bag, and told him to only take them out when he built his foundation. With the extra foundation-building pills she gave him, Jinji presumably had a great chance of successfully building his foundation. It was just that she didn't know whether he was obedient or not. Thinking up to this point, Emotienga suddenly wanted to go back. Although she'd only been out for more than a year, it felt like a long time had passed. She missed Jinji, missed her master, and missed that small immortal's cave. She'd been at Xianqing school for almost 20 years. She had relatives, a master, and friends. She really considered Xianqing school her home. This feeling was very good. At least when she was injured or tired, she had a place to go back to. Ilu and Ichio thanked her profusely and left. Emotienga touched the space between her eyebrows and entered the virtual sky world, thinking about what to do next. Since she felt she'd been out for a long time, should she go back to Xianqing school? Generally speaking, from the late stage of the foundation building realm to the peak stage of the foundation building realm, it would take 30 to 50 years to cultivate smoothly. However, her aptitude was extraordinary now, and the medicinal pills she had were also much better than ordinary people's. Presumably, she would only need about 20 years. As for forming her gold core, it might take more than 10 years of preparation. As long as she wasn't too unlucky, her chances of forming her gold core shouldn't be too low. She was only 38 years old. If everything went smoothly, she would be able to form her gold core when she was around 70 years old. However, Immerse was somewhat hesitant about this decision. If she went back and continued her closed-door meditation, it would be meaningless for her to deliberately suppress her cultivation level and prevent herself from advancing too quickly. For ordinary cultivators, the faster they reached core formation, the better. In today's cultivation environment, no matter how diligent a cultivator was, it was very difficult for them to form their gold core before the age of 100. Therefore, in the celestial pole, it was difficult for a few cultivators to form their gold core before the age of 100, even in 1,000 years. Those who could do it were all called geniuses. Because of this, her senior martial brother Shou Jing was able to form his gold core before he was 100 years old, even though his talent was not outstanding. That was why he was so famous. However, Immerse couldn't simply think of it this way. With a cultivation environment similar to the distant past era, geniuses from the distant past era, and countless medicinal pills, her spiritual aura grew very fast, and it was very difficult for her to encounter bottlenecks in realm breakthroughs. In this case, forming her gold core before she was 100 years old was almost certain. But after all, this wasn't the distant past era, so she would encounter problems that ordinary people wouldn't encounter. Her chief master once sighed in private that her senior martial brother Shou Jing formed his gold core too early. He was too young, and his foundation was unstable. Fortunately, he liked to run around on his own, and could be considered to have experienced a lot, so nothing bad happened to him. It was also because of this that her master repeatedly warned her that her mental state must keep up with him in order to form her gold core. Advancing her cultivation level too rashly wasn't a good thing. With this thought in mind, Immerse became hesitant. It had only been a year. The time she spent traveling was still too short. Chapter 200. Whether or not she could go back could be discussed later. At the very least, she'd have to stay at Bishuan Court for several months. Teaching alchemy was not an easy task. Pill recipes could be bought and sold, and the steps could be explained, but the things that needed to be paid attention to during alchemy were not clearly recorded in the pill recipe. Every alchemist had their own secrets, which were the key to success in alchemy. In addition, there was also how to form hand seals during alchemy. The pill recipe did not explain clearly. Most basic alchemy pills did not require hand seals, but some special alchemy pills required hand seals to perfectly mix the various ingredients together. Every alchemist had their own unique variations on these hand seals, which were different from the ones on the pill formulas. These changes, coupled with the time and alchemy fire during alchemy, were completely integrated to achieve the best results. Fortunately, Xiaqing was extremely talented in alchemy and comprehended very quickly. Immerse felt Immerse's talent was much higher than hers. It was just that Immerse didn't have a lot of good materials for her to practice with, so her pill concocting realm couldn't advance. Little by little, Immerse taught Xiaqing how to distinguish the degree of fusion between materials and what aspects to pay attention to when forming hand seals. Immerse wasn't afraid that Wei Haolan wouldn't fulfill her promise after she taught Xiaqing. As soon as she entered Bishuan Court, she already revealed that she left the mountain under her master's order. With Wei Haolan's experience, she should have known Immerse was an elite disciple of Xianqing school the moment she heard what Immerse said. Even though Bishuan Court was located in Linhai, isolated from the rest of the world and thousands of miles away from Xianqing school, big cultivation groups always had some special methods to track the whereabouts of their disciples. If she was detained in Bishuan Court and was investigated, a nascent soul cultivator from such a small cultivation group would be enough to consign them to eternal damnation. Every day, Immerse would study the art of pill concocting with Xiaqing. Occasionally, when she was free, she would also discuss the path of cultivation with other Bishuan Court cultivators. Several months passed by in a flash. Fellow Taoists Immerse called out to Xiaqing who was practicing figuring out the weight of materials. If someone else called out to her right now, Xiaqing definitely wouldn't even raise her head. However, since the person calling her was Mo Tiange, Xiaqing immediately raised her head. Fellow Taoist, did I do something wrong? No. Mo Tiange chuckled, then took out several jade slips from her robe and handed them to him. It's precisely because you've already done very well that I have nothing to teach you. Here are some pill recipes, and I've written down some things that I need to take note of. Xiaqing's eyes lit up when she heard those words. She hurriedly received the jade slips, immersed her consciousness into them, and began to read them with great interest. That's all my tricks. I've already taught you all of them. In the future, you can figure them out on your own. In the future, your alchemy skills will definitely be better than mine. Mo Tiange felt that she had too many things she had to do. Cultivation was her priority, and the Tao of formations was her foundation. Only after that would she have to focus on concocting medicinal pills. Xiaqing, on the other hand, was wholeheartedly focused on concocting medicinal pills. Presumably, even if Mo Tiange had countless high-grade spiritual plants she could use, she still might not be able to surpass Xiaqing in terms of concocting medicinal pills in the future. Xiaqing hastily withdrew her attention from the jade slip. That's it? Fellow Taoist, I still have a lot to learn, and I can't be like you. Fellow Taoists, my pill refinement skills aren't much better than yours, so this is all I can do. Moreover, concocting medicinal pills requires constant experimentation and contemplation. It's not something that can be done just by saying it. I can only help you avoid some detours. The rest will depend on you to do it slowly. Xiaqing had a very good understanding of concocting medicinal pills, so she couldn't help but nod when she heard what Mo Tiange said. You're right. Mo Tiange smiled. All right, take your time to practice. I'll head back first. All right. Xiaqing couldn't wait to continue studying. After saying goodbye to Mo Tiange, she once again immersed herself in the jade slips. Seeing her like this, Mo Tiange shook her head and slowly walked out of the concocting room. Outside, Yilu and Ichio were already waiting for her. When they saw her coming out, they bowed. Senior Yi. The two of them had obtained a lot of benefits from Mo Tiange during this period of time, so they were even more respectful when they called her senior. Mo Tiange didn't directly go back like she usually did. Instead, she said to them, I want to see your sect head. Yilu and Ichio glanced at each other. Yilu then said, Senior, please wait here for a moment. Junior will go and inform the sect head. Mo Tiange nodded. All right. Yilu bowed, then left in a hurry. Ichio said, Senior, this place is quite far from the sect head's main hall, so Yilu might have to wait for quite a long time. How about Junior accompany Senior to stroll around first? Sure. Mo Tiange answered indifferently. Ichio then gave some instructions to the supervisor in charge of the concocting room, then led Mo Tiange to the garden. There were many women in Bishuan court, so they also put a lot of thought into the scenery. Aside from the medicinal garden that every cultivation group had, they even arranged a garden with many exotic flowers and plants from the Eastern Sea. They were all very beautiful. Ichio led Mo Tiange to a gazebo next to the rockery, then said, Senior Yi, look at these flowers and plants. Although they aren't very rare spiritual plants, they can't be found anywhere else. As Mo Tiange stared at the flowers and plants in front of her, she couldn't help but praise the skillful hands of Bishuan Court's female disciples. She had never seen such a beautiful garden before. Among the cultivation groups in the cultivation world, aside from Bishuan Court, who else had the time to arrange a garden? It was already December now, and the new year would be coming soon. It was the coldest season. However, this garden was protected by a formation, so it was still as warm as spring and hundreds of flowers were in full bloom. Ichio suddenly exclaimed. Isn't that Martial Uncle Tang? Mo Tiange followed Ichio's gaze. Wasn't that the popular young master Tang, Tang Shen? Why did he seem to be avoiding their gazes? Upon seeing that they'd already noticed him, Tang Shen's face flushed. Mo Tiange was secretly amused. This young master Tang was really like a daughter from a noble family. He really liked to blush. But what was he looking at them for? Just as she was thinking, Tang Shen clenched his teeth. He seemed to have made up his mind and walked towards them. Emotienga became even more confused. Ichio, who was next to her, whispered, "Martial Uncle Tang." Before Emotienga could say anything, Tang Shen was already in front of them. He looked at the two of them somewhat shyly, before his gaze finally fell on Emotienga. He said in a low voice, Fellow Taoist Yi. In the past few months in Bishuan Court, aside from going to the concocting room, Emotienga only occasionally accepted Wei Haolan's invitation to exchange some cultivation knowledge. She and Tang Shen only met a few times, and each time, they didn't talk much. At most, they just greeted each other. Because of that, Emotienga only nodded faintly. Fellow Taoist Tang, what a coincidence. Tang Shen made an N sound, then rubbed his hands anxiously. He then looked at Ichio again. Ichio was rather bewildered, but after Tang Shen looked at her several times, she suddenly seemed to realize something. She was inwardly surprised, but her expression didn't change. She bowed towards the two of them and said, Senior Yi, Martial Uncle Tang. Junior still has something to do. Take your time and talk. I'll leave for a moment. Before Emotienga could respond, Tang Shen already said impatiently, Go. Upon hearing what Tang Shen said, Emotienga could only swallow her words and watch as Ichio slowly left the garden. It was already evening. There were no people playing in the garden, nor were there any part-time disciples working. The two of them were alone. Emotienga suddenly felt a bit funny. If this scene was seen by this young Master Tang's admirer, she'd most likely become Bishuan Court's public enemy tomorrow. She really didn't know what this young Master Tang wanted to say. Ichio left, but Tang Shen still looked hesitant. Sometimes he rubbed his hands, and sometimes he wiped his palms. Emotienga really didn't like a man acting like this, so she took the initiative to speak. Fellow Taoist Tang, is there something you need? Ow! Tang Shen was startled back to his senses. He gulped, seemingly trying to calm himself down. Fellow Taoist Yi, let's sit down and talk. Emotienga glanced around. There was only a small table in the pavilion, so no matter how they sat, it would look too intimate. She said, It's the same if we stand and talk. What she said was obviously a refusal. She didn't want to appear intimate with him. Tang Shen glanced at her with a bit of surprise, but his mood actually calmed down. Ever since he was a child, he had many admirers. Bishuan Court was a cultivation group for female cultivators, so the martial sisters he grew up with always wanted to get close to him. He also always thought female cultivators were the same. But now, he could see that this fellow Taoist Yi didn't want to be too intimate with him, so he heaved a sigh of relief. As for what he wanted to say next, he also felt it would be easier for him to say it. I heard fellow Taoist Yi will soon return to Kunwu, right? Emotienga nodded. Yes. I've taught all my pill concocting skills to fellow Taoist Xiaqing, so I'll be leaving soon. Then, Tang Shen cautiously glanced at her. Can I leave with fellow Taoist Yi? Emotienga was dumbfounded. She stared at Tang Shen for a while, and only said faintly when she saw his face blushing again. Fellow Taoist Tang, as Elder Qingxi's beloved grandson, it shouldn't be a problem for you to leave Linhai, right? Why do you want to leave with me? Tang Shen glanced at her nervously, then said in a low voice, Although I can leave at any time, great-grandmother doesn't feel at ease leaving me alone. However, the Martial sisters in the group are too clingy, and the Martial brothers aren't very friendly to me. Emotienga frowned and said in confusion, Could it be that your ancestor isn't worried I might have bad intentions? I don't think fellow Taoist Yi is a bad person. Tang Shen looked up and glanced at her. I'm not afraid of fellow Taoist Yi laughing at me, but ever since I was a child, I've always been surrounded by a group of martial sisters, so I don't like to get along with women. But our Bishuan court is like this. All of us are female cultivators. I heard great-grandmother say Kunwu isn't like this, so I wanted to. Fellow Taoist Tang. Emotienga interrupted him. Please forgive me for speaking bluntly, but if you've never left Linhai and your ancestor is very fond of you, I can't leave with you. If something happened to you, I wouldn't be able to bear the responsibility. It's not like that. Upon hearing her refusal, Tang Shen hastily said, I'm just not familiar with Kunwu. and fellow Taoist Yi is a disciple of a famous group, so I just want to go with you to Kunwa to take a look. I don't want fellow Taoist Yi to bear any responsibility. That's true, but would your ancestor think the same? Although she wasn't afraid of Bishuan Court's core formation cultivators, she also didn't want to take responsibility for herself. Fellow Taoist Tang, have you ever mentioned this to your ancestor? Tang Shun was rendered speechless. After a long time he finally shook his head. I want to wait for fellow Taoist Yi to agree, then I'll talk to great-grandmother. Upon seeing his appearance, Emotienga couldn't help but sigh. Fellow Taoist Tang, I don't want your ancestor to misunderstand that I'm abducting her beloved descendant, so you'd better explain it to her first. Besides, to be honest, with fellow Taoist temperament, it's better to have fellow disciples accompanying you. No matter how fellow disciples treat you, they'll always be more reliable than an outsider like me. Chapter 201. Fellow Taoist Yi. After being rejected, Tang Shen still didn't give up. However, he wasn't good with words, so he couldn't reason with her, so he could only walk around Emotienga in circles. Emotienga said helplessly, Fellow Taoist Tang, you'll get me killed like this. Huh? Tang Shen looked puzzled. Emotienga felt even more helpless. If this appearance was seen by others, this admirer of young Master Tang's would definitely hate her to the bone, and might even fight her with a sword. With their jealous temperaments, she wouldn't be able to explain herself at that time. Big Brother Tang. Just as she thought about this, the two of them heard a voice. Emotienga turned around, and a frown immediately appeared on her face. It was actually Junior Martial Sister Hua, young Master Tang's crazy admirer. Good things never come true, but bad things always do. Being seen by this person. Isn't she trying to kill me? This Junior Martial Sister Hua was alone, but she aggressively approached fellow Taoist Yi. She stared at fellow Taoist Yi and asked condescendingly, Fellow Taoist Yi, what are you talking about with Big Brother Tang? He's the one talking, not me. Emotienga thought. She looked at Junior Martial Sister Hua, who was half a head taller than her, and said flatly, Nothing. If fellow Taoist Hua wants to know, you can ask fellow Taoist Tang. Is that so? Her knife-like gaze cut Emotienga's face. Emotienga didn't doubt that this woman wanted to cut off the flesh on her face piece by piece. She smiled bitterly in her heart. Although Bishuan Court's female cultivators were strong, this wasn't a world where women were respected. Even a soft-hearted man like Tang Shen would probably prefer that Junior Martial Sister Yin, she met in Ziwei's Immortal's cave, who liked to act coquettishly, right? Of course, strong women could also be cute, but if their strength turned into coercion, they wouldn't be cute at all. Emotienga didn't do anything shameful, so she wasn't afraid of her. She didn't back down and just said coldly, Does fellow Taoist Hua have anything else to say? Seeing that Emotienga didn't seem to have a guilty conscience, Junior Martial Sister Hua frowned. Fellow Taoist Yi, I want to ask you what you want to do. Why are you talking to Big Brother Tang, instead of studying pill concocting with Junior Martial Sister Xiaqing? Seeing that Emotienga didn't answer, Junior Martial Sister Hua took another step towards her. Fellow Taoist Yi, I have to remind you, don't covet things that don't belong to you. Emotienga didn't feel weak under Hua Jiyu's intense gaze. Instead, she felt like laughing. She was going to leave anyway, so there was no need for her to be afraid of anything. Thus, the corners of her lips curled into a sneer and she said, Fellow Taoist Hua, you might as well remind yourself of this. This Junior Martial Sister Hua obviously didn't expect Emotienga would refute her. Moreover, Emotienga's words were very rude, so she was stunned for a moment before she finally understood what was going on. She instantly became furious. Yi Xiaotian, don't be so shameless. The angrier she got, the calmer Emotienga became. She even had a smile on her face. Fellow Taoist Hua, haven't you always wanted to teach me a lesson? Why hasn't he made a move yet? Let me give you a piece of advice. A frog at the bottom of a well can't talk about the sea. With fellow Taoist Hua's temperament, it's fine if he stays in Linhai for the rest of his life, but if he goes to Kunwu one day, You. Junior Martial Sister Hua's expression changed greatly when she heard Emotienga's rude words. In all of Bishuan court, aside from the 3 elders, no one else dared to talk to her like that. However, Emotinga's ice-cold expression made her feel a bit guilty. She also recalled what her elders said a few months ago. You want to teach that Yi Xiaotian a lesson? Third girl, you really don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. She was unconvinced. Great-grandmother, she's just a Kunwa cultivator. What's wrong with teaching her a lesson? She still needs our help, but she's actually giving me that attitude. Her great-grandmother, Elder Qingmiao, flung her long sleeves and said coldly, I said you don't know the immensity of heaven and earth, but you still won't admit it. You've been spoiled rotten by your mother since you were a child. She's just a Kunwa cultivator? You were also there when your senior martial sister sect head made her report. Didn't you hear she's a Xianqing school cultivator? But she's just a foundation-building cultivator. What's so great about her? But she also said she left the mountain to travel under her master's order. Elder Qingmiao glared at her, feeling exasperated at her for failing to meet her expectations. Xianqing school can only accept disciples if they're in the core formation realm or above. Her master must be a core formation cultivator without a doubt. If she's favored, her status in the school won't be lower than yours. They have more nascent soul cultivators than us core formation cultivators. We can't afford to provoke them. She was dumbfounded and momentarily forgot to reply. Ever since she was born, she was the direct descendant of a core formation cultivator, so she was doted on. She never expected a foreign cultivator might have a status not lower than hers. Pulling herself back to reality, she stared at Emotienga, who was looking at her with an arrogant expression. She'd always used this expression on others. When had anyone ever treated her like this? She was so angry that she lost all reason and said angrily, Who do you think you are? You actually dared to talk to me like that. Then who do you think you are? Emotienga showed a faint smile, looking calm and composed. My cultivation level isn't much, and I don't have any strong points. Do you really think you're amazing just because you have a core formation elder? Elder sister, with your attitude, you can forget about forming your gold core for the rest of your life. You can just stay in the early stage of the foundation building realm and dream until you die. You, without saying another word, she pulled out her flying sword and was about to stab Emotienga. Emotienga took a step back and stared at Tang Shun, who was staring blankly in the corner. Fellow Taoist Tang. Tang Shun was at a loss. Do you want to watch your junior martial sister attack a guest in the school? Oh. Tang Shun didn't understand and hastily pulled out his magic tool. Junior martial sister Hua. Seeing that Tang Shun wanted to protect Emotienga, this junior martial sister Hua became even angrier. Big brother Tang, you actually attacked me for her? Tang Shun wasn't very confident, but in the end, he still plucked up his courage and said, But fellow Taoist Yi is our honored guest. How could you attack an honored guest? Honored guest? This junior martial sister Hua sneered. Have you ever seen an honored guest mocking their master? She's the one mocking me. She's right. A dignified voice came from the side. The 3 of them turned around and saw a middle-aged woman dressed in plain clothes, standing at the entrance of the garden. This woman seemed to be about 40 years old. She didn't have any wrinkles on her face, looked dignified, and had an overbearing aura. Behind her were several maids holding cups. They were quiet and didn't make a single sound. Upon seeing this person, Tang Shun and this junior martial sister Hua were both dumbfounded. Soon after, the 2 of them hastily put away their magic tools and knelt to salute her. Great-grandmother. Greetings to Elder. The woman nodded slightly and walked over slowly. Her sharp gaze was fixed on Emotienga. Emotienga showed a faint smile, then cupped her hands and said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner, Junior Yi Xiaotian greets Elder Qingmiao. Upon hearing this, a hint of admiration appeared in the woman's eyes. She softened her tone and said, No need to be so polite. You're a smart child. Emotienga lowered her hands, lowered her eyes, and didn't say anything. This Elder Qingmiao also no longer looked at her. Her gaze fell on the 2 juniors kneeling on the ground. Shuner, stand up. Tang Shun looked up anxiously, then answered with a low voice, Yes. Thank you, Elder. This junior martial sister Hua also wanted to stand up, But when she raised her head and saw the stern gaze on her, she didn't have the courage. She bit her lip and continued to kneel. Some maids had already come to tidy up the mess in the pavilion, laid down the plates and cushions, then retreated to the side. Elder Qingmiao walked into the pavilion and sat down. She took the green tea the maids had just brewed and slowly took a sip. She then said, "Lin you're already in your 40s this year, right?" Junior Marshal Sister Hua, who was kneeling on the ground, answered in a low voice. The corners of Emotinga's mouth curled up. In fact, she called this woman Big Sister, just to annoy her. She didn't expect the woman to be older than her, so what she said just now wasn't wrong. She was already in her 40s, but she was still so unruly. Even if foundation-building cultivators had a lifespan of more than 300 years, based on the way she lived, she wouldn't make any progress, even if she lived for more than 300 years. In this lifetime, she shouldn't even think about advancing to the middle stage or late stage. Elder Qingmiao put down her teacup, and her gaze turned cold. You're already in your 40s, yet you still have the nerve to admit it. I've told you before, don't be so arrogant. You didn't listen to me. But great-grandmother. But what? Elder Qingmiao interrupted her and slammed the table. Hua Yilin, do you think you can do whatever you want just because you have an old woman like me as your backer? Your mother didn't teach you well since you were young, and you don't know how to learn well. If you had the ability, you could have formed your gold core by yourself. But what do you have now? You're just an initial stage foundation establishment cultivator. Yet you don't know how to improve. Mo Tiange stood on the side, watching as if this matter had nothing to do with her. So this junior martial sister Hua's name was Hua Yilin. What a waste of a good name. Hua Yilin, who was kneeling on the ground, pursed her lips and said nothing. Elder Qingmiao glared at her angrily. What? Do you feel wronged? I think this little fellow Taoist is right. Just because he had a core formation elder, he thought he was really something. Can you rely on me for the rest of your life? Do you not want to make a realm breakthrough in the future? Last time, when I sent a disciple out, I should have thrown you out and let you go to Kunwu to broaden your horizons, lest you embarrass yourself in the future. His words were harsh, and they were truly ruthless. Hua Yilin's eyes reddened. She glared at Mo Tiange angrily, but she didn't dare to refute. Elder Qingmiao became even angrier. What? You're not convinced? Fine. Since there are guests here today, I won't lecture you too much. Go to the reflection temple and face the wall by yourself. You're not allowed to come out until I say you can. Great-grandmother. Hua Yilin was so shocked that tears fell from her eyes. Quickly go. Elder Qingmiao glared at her mercilessly. Mo Tiange bit her lip, stood up and dashed away. Seeing her leaving obediently, Elder Qingmiao's expression finally relaxed. She then glanced at Tang Shen. Shen, if there's nothing else, go and serve your great-grandmother. She was thinking about you just now. Tang Shen felt as if he was granted amnesty. He hastily saluted and said, yes. Then he hurriedly ran away. In the blink of an eye, aside from Mo Tiange, Elder Qingmiao and her maids were the only ones left on the scene. Mo Tiange's gaze flickered, but in the end, she chose to remain silent. She used the method she used to deal with elders at Xianqing school. She lowered her head and stood quietly on the side. Elder Qingmiao didn't look at her right away. Instead, she took the handkerchief the maid gave her, carefully wiped her face, then raised her head to look at Mo Tiange. She looked at her very carefully and for a long time, but Mo Tiange's expression remained calm. Finally, Elder Qingmiao withdrew her gaze, picked up the teacup again and said slowly, little fellow Taoist, you really aren't simple. Chapter 202. This was Mo Tiange's first time meeting Elder Qingmiao. She'd been at Bishuan Court for several months, but all this time, it was always Wei Haolan and the other foundation-building cultivators who received her. The 3 core formation elders had never met her. Of course, he was a core formation realm senior. Generally speaking, core formation cultivators cultivated in seclusion. Who would want to meet a junior who wasn't from their own sect? They weren't that free, and they wouldn't do something that would lower their status. However, even if she hadn't met the 3 core formation elders, She was never worried Elder Qingmiao would really harm her. She had taken over Shangqing Palace's affairs and helped Lord Taoist Jinghe make connections. So Imo Tiange was very clear about the twists and turns in the hearts of high-level cultivators and cultivation groups. In the eyes of high-grade cultivators, especially those who supported their sex, no matter how much they doted on their juniors, it was impossible for it to affect their view of benefits. Although they doted on their children, they couldn't mix these feelings with official business. Therefore, Hua Yilan's threat sounded like a joke to those in the know. But now, Elder Qingmiao used this kind of tone to say something like that to her, which was thought-provoking. Not simple. What was not simple? Aside from her pill-concocting skills, in the eyes of Bishuan court cultivators, Imo Tiange was just an ordinary foreign cultivator. What Elder Qingmiao said definitely wasn't a compliment to her pill-concocting skills. Imo Tiange's expression didn't change. She merely raised her gaze slightly and said, "Senior, you flatter me." Elder Qingmiao gently swirled the teacup in her hand, but didn't drink it. She said slowly, "I wasn't praising you. Since Senior didn't say anything, Junior can only take it as praise." Imo Tiange still had a faint smile on her face. It seemed she didn't mind Imo Tiange's words at all. Elder Qingmiao once again looked up at her with a sharp gaze. Imo Tiange didn't feel guilty at all, and just let her look. Time passed bit by bit. Elder Qingmiao even used the spiritual aura pressure of a core formation cultivator. But Imo Tiange still had a faint smile on her face. Although her smile was somewhat stiff, and her forehead was even covered in sweat, she was still smiling in the end. After a long time, Elder Qingmiao finally withdrew her spiritual aura pressure and asked coldly, "You? Who are you in the end?" Imo Tiange secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Even though she cultivated the soul-refining art, and the strength of her divine sense was far stronger than that of cultivators in the same realm as her, a core formation cultivator was still a core formation cultivator. She almost used all her strength to resist this spiritual aura pressure. She naturally knew why Elder Qingmiao treated her like this. Imo Tiange had long formed a habit of using her divine sense to pay attention to her surroundings at all times. So she immediately knew Elder Qingmiao was here. But even though she knew, she still said those words to Hua Yilan. As a core formation cultivator, Elder Qingmiao couldn't help but feel a bit embarrassed when a junior was lectured like that by a junior. It was precisely because she couldn't hold back her pride that she reprimanded Hua Yilan even more. She wanted to show that as a core formation cultivator, she would never shield a junior and lower her status. However, reprimanding was one thing. But in the end, they were still her descendants. She also wanted to see why this junior, who dared to lecture her descendants, had such guts. He knew a core formation cultivator was coming, but he still wanted to teach a disciple of Bishuan court a lesson. How could an early-stage foundation-building cultivator be so bold? Imo Tiange only took a moment to think before she answered. Junior is the disciple of Lord Taoist Xianin from Xianqing School. Lord Taoist Xianin. Elder Qingmiao slowly uttered this Taoist name. The way she looked at Imo Tiange gradually changed. In the end, the fierceness in her expression disappeared, and she showed a faint smile. Turns out your master is a nascent soul cultivator. No wonder he has such guts. Even if she didn't know about Lord Taoist Xianin, he was naturally a nascent soul cultivator. As one of the 3 great core formation elders with the highest cultivation level in Bishuan court, Elder Qingmiao naturally wouldn't be ignorant of this. Imo Tiange merely smiled and maintained her politeness. Junior was just very lucky. Although that was the case, how could a nascent soul cultivator accept a disciple so easily? If she had a nascent soul cultivator as her master, the benefits would be obvious. After forming her gold core, every step of cultivation would be difficult. 2/3 of core formation cultivators would be stuck in the early stage of the core formation realm for their entire lives. With the guidance of a nascent soul cultivator, not only would they be able to avoid many detours in the core formation realm, but they could also give them pointers when they tried to form their nascent soul. As Elder Qingmiao thought about it carefully, she couldn't help but feel jealous. Although she was an elder of a cultivation group and a dignified core formation cultivator, she couldn't worship a nascent soul senior as her master right now. Nevertheless, She was an elder of a cultivation group after all, so she quickly calmed down and said with a faint smile, "In that case, little fellow Taoist must have excellent spiritual roots and extraordinary talents, right?" Emotienga answered faintly, "Junior's aptitude isn't bad. So Junior was able to receive Master as her master's disciple." "Is that so? Little fellow Taoist's pill concocting skills are also extraordinary," Elder Qingmiao said disapprovingly. Emotienga was keenly aware of something. Her gaze fell on Elder Qingmiao's half-smiling face and she said bluntly, "Does Senior have some advice?" Elder Qingmiao stood up and slowly paced around the pavilion, seemingly thinking about something. After a long time, she finally said, "Little friendy, do you know of a kind of medicinal pill called Clear Sky Pill?" Emotienga was stunned. This is a high-level core formation medicinal pill that's 10 times better than soul-solidifying pills. When she first obtained the virtual sky world, because the medicinal plants growing inside were very suitable for concocting this pill, she used this Clear Sky Pill to practice. "Correct," Elder Qingmiao nodded. "Little friend, you really came from a famous cultivation group. Your vision is extraordinary. Very few people know about this Clear Sky Pill." Junior's master also made a realm breakthrough several years ago, so Junior can still be considered clear about matters related to the core formation realm. Elder Qingmiao smiled at her while walking slowly. "Even so, I can see that little friendy is very valued by your master." At first she called her little friendy, but now she called her little friendy. This form of address was much more intimate. Emotienga could tell that Elder Qingmiao intentionally wanted to get closer to her. Based on what she said, it was very likely related to medicinal pills. In any case, she still had some confidence in the Tao of pill concocting, so she didn't avoid the topic. "Yes, Junior's achievements today are all thanks to Master's careful guidance." Seeing how calm Emotienga was, Elder Qingmiao inwardly re-evaluated her identity. Little friend Yi has such brilliant pill concocting skills, and knows about Clear Sky pills. So can you concoct them? I've concocted them a few times with Master. So I can. But if I were to concoct them myself, I'm afraid the success rate wouldn't be too high. She didn't tell the truth. In fact, she didn't concoct many soul-solidifying pills, but she concocted many Clear Sky pills. For her, the success rate of concocting Clear Sky pills was much higher than concocting soul-solidifying pills. However, how could it be so easy for a foundation-building cultivator to successfully concoct Clear Sky pills? This explanation was more in line with the truth. Sure enough, Elder Qingmiao didn't doubt her. She nodded and said, "If you've only concocted them a few times, your success rate naturally wouldn't be high. What's your estimate of your success rate?" Emotienga paused for a moment, then answered with uncertainty, "About 40 to 50%. Elder Qingmiao smiled. 40 to 50% is already pretty good. It seems little friend Ye's pill concocting skills are indeed extraordinary. 30 to 40% was the standard for ordinary concoctions masters." Although 40 to 50% seemed like an uncertain increase of 10%, it was already close to the level of great concoctions masters. After all, Clear Sky pills were high-grade medicinal pills, so they were several times more difficult to concoct than soul-solidifying pills. Even in Kunwu, there weren't many people who could reach the level of great concoctions masters. Little friend Yi, Elder Qingmiao hesitated for a moment, but a moment later, she made up her mind. "During this period of time, we've been watching you teaching that girl Xiaqing pill concocting skills, so we have a good idea of your pill concocting skills. It just so happens that during this period of time, the three of us have gathered enough spiritual plants for a furnace of Clear Sky pills. So we need to concoct a furnace of pills. However, Xiaqing has never concocted Clear Sky pills before, so she's not confident. If we send people to Kunwu to ask someone to concoct pills for us, it'll take too much time. And it'll also be hard to find a trustworthy person, so..." She stopped and looked at Emotienga. "Little friendy, could you concoct a furnace of Clear Sky pills for us?" Emotienga didn't answer immediately. Concocting Clear Sky pills wasn't a trivial matter. Not to mention the success rate, it would also take a long time. Of course. We trust little friend Ye's pill concocting skills. And we trust little friend Ye's character even more. If the concoction fails, we definitely won't make things difficult for you. If you succeed, we'll prepare another generous gift to thank little friend Yi for helping us. Mo Tiange glanced at Elder Qingmiao, then continued to ponder. After a long time, a smile finally appeared on her face. Since Senior said so, I have no reason to refuse. Elder Qingmiao looked delighted. She warmly held Mo Tiange's hand and patted it. Good. Although little friend Yi is a nascent soul Senior's disciple, and is used to seeing precious treasures, we old fellows can still give you one or two unique little things. Liusu, Elder Qingmiao called out, causing a maid in the queue to step forward. Her cultivation level was already in the 10th layer of the aura refining realm, and she was only a step away from entering the foundation building realm. In the end, she was a core formation elder's maid, so her cultivation level was a bit higher than Yilu and Ichio's. Here. A few days ago, we caught a feifei. In a bit, you can give it to little friend Yi. A hint of astonishment flitted across the maid's eyes, but she didn't say anything. She only answered, Yes, Grandmaster. Mo Tiange also looked surprised. She thought for a moment then asked, Senior, are you talking about a kind of divine beast mentioned in ancient texts, feifei? Yes. Elder Qingmiao was also surprised for a moment, but she soon smiled and said, Little friend Yi is really knowledgeable. Nowadays, very few people know about these so-called divine beasts. However, the one I'm talking about isn't a real feifei. It just looks like a feifei and seems to have the bloodline of a divine beast. So people in the Eastern Sea call these spiritual beasts feifei. Although feifei's cultivation levels aren't high, they have miraculous effects that ordinary spiritual beasts don't have. Oh, may I know what kind of miraculous effects it has? Elder Qingmiao smiled and said, According to ancient texts, feifei can relieve worries. The feifei we're talking about indeed has the effect of calming one's mind, if you keep it by your side. In addition, feifei are very sensitive to spiritual aura, so they're the best for searching for things. So that's how it is, Elder Qingmiao went on to say. Although this feifei we're talking about isn't an ancient era's spiritual beast, it's not easy to find one in the Eastern Sea. This can be considered a greeting gift for little friend Yi. When the clear sky pills are successfully concocted, we'll prepare another generous gift for you. Even if it doesn't work, we'll still give little friend Yi compensation for your hard work. Since Senior said so, it would be impolite for me to refuse. Elder Qingmiao nodded with a smile. Little friend Yi is a straightforward person. If little friend Yi wasn't already a disciple of a famous school, this old woman would have appreciated your talent. What a pity, what a pity. Oh no, I mean fortunately. Mo Tiange raised her head. The two of them smiled at each other. Whether they each had their own thoughts or not, they seemed to be very harmonious for now. However, it seemed their return to Kunwu would have to be delayed. Chapter 203. Once they finished talking about business, they chatted a bit more before Elder Qingmiao left. Mo Tiange heaved a sigh of relief. What she told Elder Qingmiao was always half true. Although she wasn't afraid Elder Qingmiao would harm her, she still felt uneasy facing a core formation cultivator. Once Elder Qingmiao left, Yilu and Ichio came in. Senior Yi. Mo Tiange wiped her face. Why were you gone for so long? Yilu said. Junior came back a long time ago, but Elder Qingmiao was here, so Junior didn't dare to disturb you. That being said, although the sect head's conference hall was far away, it wouldn't take that long. She probably came back when Hua Yilin was here, but she didn't dare to come in. Mo Tiange didn't blame them. They were Bishuan court disciples after all, so they couldn't offend an elder's descendant. Have you reported it to sect head Wei? Yilu answered. Junior already explained it to sect head. Sect head told me to invite Senior Yi to talk about it. She originally wanted to see Wei Haolan to talk about her departure, but after what Elder Qingmiao said, she didn't need to mention it anymore. Nevertheless, it was reasonable for her to talk to Wei Haolan first. After all, elders only made decisions. Some execution matters still needed the sect head's approval. Mo Tiange said, and I'll go now. In addition, It was best to mention Tang Shun's matter to Wei Haolan. If something really happened, she didn't want to get involved. Mo Tiange was silent all the way. When she arrived at the hall, Wei Haolan was already waiting for her. As soon as she saw Mo Tiange, she came to greet her warmly. Fellow Taoist Yi, I was held up by some mundane matters just now. I'm really sorry for making you wait for a long time. Mo Tiange smiled and returned the greeting. Sect head Wei is too polite. I didn't wait for you, so I came a bit late. Wei Haolan led her inside, and they both took their respective seats. Maids had already served them tea. Mo Tiange stayed here for several months, and Bishuang Court's hospitality had always been excellent. As soon as the two of them sat down, Wei Haolan said with a smile, Fellow Taoist Yi, I know a bit about why you came here. However, fellow Taoist Yi should have met Elder Qingmiao, right? Mo Tiange said frankly, Yes, I originally came to say goodbye, but now I don't need to. Apparently, Wei Haolan already knew Elder Qingmiao's plan. Now that she heard what Elder Qingmiao said, she said, It seems fellow Taoist Yi has agreed to Elder Qingmiao's request. Mo Tiange nodded. Since Senior Qingmiao has sincerely invited me, I'll have to trouble sect head Wei for a few more days. Wei Haolan smiled happily. What are you talking about, fellow Taoist Yi? If you can stay, everyone in my sect will be very happy. Does fellow Taoist Yi have anything to prepare for this matter? If there's anything you don't like, please don't hesitate to tell me. About that, Mo Tiange muttered to herself. There were naturally many things she didn't like about concocting medicinal pills. For example, the spiritual aura in the concocting room wasn't abundant enough, the grade of the pill furnace wasn't high enough, and the earthly fire was also a bit lacking. However, Bishuang Court still couldn't meet her requirements. Sect Leader Wei, the earth fire in your sect's concocting room is fine for concocting other medicinal pills, but it's a bit lacking when it comes to concocting clear sky pills. If you have a better concocting fire, you should be able to increase the chances of successfully concocting pills. Oh, Wei Haolan immediately said. What kind of concocting fire does fellow Taoist Yi think you can find? If I can find one, I'll definitely use the entire sect's strength to find one for you. Mo Tiange smiled. That's not necessary. When it comes to concocting fires, the most common ones are naturally cultivators Dantian real fire, followed by external fires like heavenly fire and earthly fire. Among them, the best are the three great real fires, sun real fire, earthly pole real fire, and samadhi real fire. The easiest to obtain is earthly pole real fire, which can be obtained as long as the earthly fire vein reaches a certain level. However, this isn't something that can be obtained just by begging. If there aren't any good earthly fire veins in Linhai, there's nowhere to get them. Therefore, after thinking about it, I can only ask the three core formation elders for help. Wei Haolan was puzzled. What should the three elders do to find a good concocting fire? There's no need to find one. Mo Tiange shook her head. Sun real fire can only be found by chance, and samadhi real fire hasn't appeared for many years. None of the three great real fires can be found in a short time. Only the Dantian real fire of high-level cultivators can match the effects of the three great real fires in pill concocting. Although the concocting fire of core formation cultivators isn't as good, it's much better than the earthly fire currently used in concocting rooms. It should be enough to concoct clear sky pills. Oh, I see. Wei Haolan understood what she meant. Fellow Taoist Yi wants the three elders to use their Dantian real fires to help you concoct medicinal pills? Correct. Mo Tiange nodded. Of course. The three elders can take turns to rest. Even if it's a bit slow, I reckon 3 days should be enough. This? Wei Haolan hesitated. She thought for a moment then asked. Fellow Taoist Yi, the three elders are the cultivators with the highest cultivation levels in Bishuan Court. Usually, when the three elders are here, other disciples won't dare to offend you. But if the three elders are all tied up by other matters, I understand what sect head Wei means, Mo Tiange said with a smile. That's why I said the three elders can take turns to rest. One elder only needs to provide Dantian real fire. Then what about spiritual aura consumption? Is it possible that one of the elders is providing Dantian real fire, while the other two are recovering? Emotinga shook her head. Rest assured, sect head Wei. According to my estimation, when one elder runs out of spiritual aura, another elder will be able to recover. If they use restorative panaceas, their recovery speed will be even faster. Oh, I see. That being said, there would always be one elder in a state of abundant spiritual aura. Wei Haolan felt relieved and said with a smile, That's easy. I'll explain it to the three elders later. Apart from that, does fellow Taoist Yi have any other requests? Emotinga thought for a moment, then shook her head. None for the time being. Wei Haolan heaved a sigh of relief. Her one request already mobilized the three core formation elders. If she had any other requests, she didn't know whether she could fulfill them or not. That being the case, fellow Taoist Yi should rest for a few days. In a few days, when the materials are ready, I'll let fellow Taoist Yi have a look. Emotinga nodded. She indeed had to rest for a few days to adjust her body's condition to its peak. That way her senses would be sharper. However, she hesitated for a moment, then said, Sect head Wei, there's one thing I don't know whether I should tell you or not. Oh, what is it? Wei Haolan was a bit puzzled by Emotinga's expression. Emotinga said, Just now, fellow Taoist Tang Shun from your group mentioned to me whether I could take him with me if I leave. Huh? Wei Haolan was startled, then shocked. Her sharp gaze immediately swept over Emotinga. Emotinga knew Wei Haolan misunderstood her. She sighed and continued to say, I know fellow Taoist Tang is the beloved grandson of an elder from your group, so I refused. Sect head Wei, please forgive me. Fellow Taoist Tang hasn't traveled before, so if he wants someone to take him with him, he should be accompanied by a fellow disciple. It's not appropriate for me to take matters into my own hands. Wei Haolan was also a sensible person. She immediately understood the meaning behind Emotinga's words and said with a smile, Fellow Taoist Yi, you're being too polite. This matter was presumably Junior Marshal Brother Tang's impulsive action, and it was originally inappropriate. It's only natural that fellow Taoist refused. Seeing that Wei Haolan understood what she meant, Emotinga smiled and said, I'll talk to Sect Head Wei about this matter. Alright, I'll go back and rest. I'll have to trouble Sect Head Wei to handle other chores. Of course. Fellow Taoist Yi, please go. Wei Haolan cordially saw her off. When Emotinga returned to the VIP building, the maid named Liusu was already waiting outside. She was holding a pure white spiritual beast in her arms. Its spiritual aura didn't seem to be rich. It seemed to be only in the first rank. As soon as she saw Emotinga, Liusu bowed and saluted her. Senior Yi, Junior was ordered by Grandmaster to bring Feifei here. No need to be so polite. Emotinga looked at the Feifei in Liusu's arms and asked curiously, This is a Feifei? Why does it look like it's only in the first rank? Liusu answered, Senior, this Feifei is still a cub. Our Grandmaster caught it not long ago. It was just born at that time. Moreover, Feifei are spiritual beasts with mediocre cultivation levels. Generally, adult Feifei are only in the second or third rank. They have a kind of miraculous ability. No matter how ferocious a spiritual beast is, it can coexist peacefully with them. So that's how it is. Emotinga reached out her hand and stroked the little beast that looked like a fox but was only as big as a kitten. Its eyes were closed. She didn't know whether it was sleeping or not, but it didn't move at all and let Emotinga stroke it. Liusu handed the Feifei to her. Senior Yi, this spiritual beast has already hatched, so it can't recognize its master. However, Senior can use your divine comprehension to establish a contract with it to make it obey you. Contract. Emotinga raised her eyebrows. Isn't a spiritual beast contract a contract to recognize its master? Liusu was dumbfounded, but she soon smiled and said, Senior, don't you know that there's a kind of spiritual beast contract where both parties sign a contract? Seeing that Emotinga really didn't know, she explained, Presumably, Senior doesn't know much about spiritual beasts, right? If the spiritual beast hasn't hatched yet, we can drip blood on it to recognize its master. But if it's already hatched, we can establish a subordinate contract with it. This can only be done if your divine comprehension is much stronger than the spiritual beasts. With this kind of spiritual beast contract, Not only can the spiritual beast not harm its master, but the master also can't harm the spiritual beast. I see. Emotienga roughly understood. Generally speaking, after a spiritual beast recognized its master, even its life belonged to its master, and the master didn't have any obligations. However, with this subordinate contract, the master could only order the spiritual beast, but it didn't mean he had the spiritual beast. After thinking it through, Emotienga asked, "Miss, can you tell me how to establish a subordinate contract?" Liusu smiled and said, "This isn't a secret technique, so of course I can." She then told Emotienga in detail how to establish the contract. In the end she said, "Senior Yi, rest assured, this subordinate contract can be cancelled. Grandmaster Qingmiao already cancelled the contract before, so you can establish a new contract with the Feifei." "I understand. Thank your grandmaster on my behalf." Liusu bowed, gave her a jade slip that recorded how to raise a Feifei, then took her leave. As soon as Liusu left, Ilu and Ichio surrounded her. "So this is a Feifei. It looks so cute." "Yes, it looks like a raccoon, but it's much cuter than a raccoon." The two of them had been with Emotienga for a long time, so they were familiar with her temperament, so they dared to get close to her. Emotienga smiled and asked, "Haven't you seen a Feifei before?" "Yes." Ichio looked up and said, "Feifei are very rare. Although they don't have any attack power, their ability to find spiritual objects is very good, and they look cute. Whenever one appears, the asking price is extremely high. How could we have the money to buy one?" Ichio said, "Even if we have the money, we can't buy one. Even the sect head doesn't have one. So how could we have a chance?" "That's right. In other words, this Feifei was really rare. Elder Qingmiao was really willing to pay to befriend her." Chapter 204. After obtaining the Feifei, Emotienga followed Liusu's instructions and signed a subordinate contract with it. She then gave this little spiritual beast to Ilu and Ichio to take care of. She didn't take it with her because she didn't have time right now, and because Ilu and Ichio liked this kind of spiritual beast very much, and always wanted to touch and hug it. So she might as well comply with their wishes. Spiritual beasts like the Feifei were cute, harmless, and had the function of calming one's mind and searching for spiritual objects, so girls liked them the most. However, Emotienga didn't have much of a woman's temperament. She also had the spirit-concealing pendant and countless medicinal pills, so she only had a dispensable attitude towards the Feifei. However, this was Elder Qingmiao's kind intentions, so it would be embarrassing if she didn't accept it. After resting for a few days, she began to prepare to concoct clear sky pills. Emotienga was already very familiar with concocting clear sky pills, but this was the first time the people from Bichuan Court concocted clear sky pills, so they were extremely nervous. Xiaqing asked her more than once whether she could really concoct them. At first, Emotienga comforted her, but in the end, she simply didn't answer. She had already concocted clear sky pills countless times. Even if she used an ordinary concocting furnace and a core formation cultivator's concocting fire, she would still have a success rate of more than 60%. If everything went according to her plan, and no one made a mistake, her success rate would reach 70%. If she told Elder Qingmiao about this, she would probably be very happy. Even in Kunwu, it would be very difficult to find a concocting master with a success rate of 70%, so she could only look for one in a pill concocting sect like Pill Cauldron sect. Several days passed in the blink of an eye. The preparations for concocting clear sky pills were completed, and Xiaqing showed the processed spiritual plants to Emotienga. Although their age wasn't too high and their quality wasn't very good, the amount was quite enough. Taking into account the failure rate, she estimated she could make about 30 pills. Clear sky pills weren't the aura-nourishing pills or aura-converging pills used by aura-refining cultivators. They contained a large amount of spiritual aura, so it would take about 10 days to half a month to refine the spiritual aura inside each pill. This many clear sky pills should be enough for the 3 core formation cultivators to cultivate for more than half a year. As for core formation cultivators, It was very rare for them to continuously use medicinal pills to cultivate. This number was already a very impressive number. Emotinga told Wei Haolan her conclusion. As a result, the 3 core formation elders wanted to see her on the same day. Emotinga had seen a lot of core formation cultivators, so she didn't feel nervous at all. However, these 3 core formation cultivators were the best cultivators in Bishuan Court after all, so it was better for her to act a bit more cautiously. After being led by Wei Haolan for a long time, Emotinga finally arrived at a floating pagoda towering in the clouds. Wei Haolan introduced, "This pagoda was built by the founder of our sect. It's called the Tao Achieving Pagoda. This pagoda is very special. The spiritual aura here is very rich, and the spiritual aura on each floor doesn't interfere with each other. Because of that, once cultivators form their gold cores in Bishuan Court, they'll move to this pagoda to cultivate." Emotinga stared at the pagoda floating in the clouds and shrouded in immortal aura. She sighed and said, "Turns out there's actually such a marvelous sight in this world. If I didn't go out, I wouldn't have known the world was so vast." Just by standing outside the pagoda, one could already feel the spiritual energy in the pagoda assaulting one's senses. One could imagine how thick the spiritual energy in the pagoda was. The founder of Bishuan Court was indeed an outstanding person of her generation. Wei Haolan smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist, ye understands this very well, and you're also the descendant of a famous cultivation group. Presumably, several hundred years later, you'll also have a chance to reach the great Tao." Emotinga shook her head with a smile, but didn't say anything else. When they reached the bottom of the pagoda, they saw a transporting formation laid on the ground. Wei Haolan invited Emotinga to stand on it, then the transporting formation was activated. A white light flashed, and the 2 of them were already standing inside the pagoda. The inside of the pagoda was very spacious, but it was empty aside from several praying mats. Upon seeing them, a middle-aged male cultivator with 3 strands of long beard walked towards them. "Greetings to the sect head." Perhaps because this male cultivator was a core formation cultivator's personal disciple, he obviously wasn't as frightened as the other male cultivators when facing Wei Haolan. His attitude was polite, but his expression was calm. Wei Haolan's attitude was also quite polite. "Senior Martial Brother Shengguan, I brought this fellow Taoist Yi to see the 3 elders. Do the 3 elders have time?" The male cultivator's gaze fell on Emotinga, and he quickly sized her up. He seemed a bit surprised at her young age, but he very politely withdrew his gaze and nodded towards her. "So this is fellow Taoist Yi." Emotinga was also quite surprised because this male cultivator was actually a late-stage foundation building cultivator. Moreover, he seemed to have already reached the peak stage of the foundation building realm. Emotinga raised her hands and clasped her hands in return. The male cultivator's gaze returned to Wei Haolan. "The elders are on the 3rd floor. They're waiting for the 2 of you." "Thank you, Senior Martial Brother Shengguan." After Wei Haolan expressed her gratitude, she pulled Emotinga to the other side, then stepped on the transporting formation again. The transporting formation was activated. After the white light faded, the 2 of them went to the next floor. This floor was empty. "Fellow Taoist Yi, aren't you very curious? Among our foundation building cultivators, the one with the highest cultivation level is actually Senior Martial Brother Shengguan?" Emotinga turned her head, feeling puzzled. This was Bishuan Court's business. She didn't ask, so why did Wei Haolan want to talk about it? Wei Haolan's expression was still as calm as ever, but there was a hint of jealousy in the corners of her eyes. She said flatly, "Who told Senior Martial Brother Shengguan to be a cultivator with mutated spiritual roots that we haven't recruited in several hundred years?" Wei Haolan then turned to smile at Emotinga. "Fellow Taoist Yi, don't you think it's very interesting? Bishuan Court is a cultivation group for female cultivators, but the disciple with the highest aptitude is actually a male disciple." Emotinga shook her head. "The matter of spiritual roots has always been difficult to control. Whether it's a man or a woman isn't something that can be decided by human strength. Take Xianqing School for example. In the entire school, in terms of aptitude, she was probably the one with the highest, right? However, for several generations, Not only were all the genius disciples with single spiritual roots at Xianqing School male, but among the 6 great nascent soul cultivators, there was only one female cultivator. You're right. Wei Haolan smiled bitterly. Alas, although we all know it's not senior martial brother Shangguan's fault, we still feel embarrassed. In fact, weren't the 3 elders the same? But there's nothing we can do about it. Senior martial brother Shangguan is currently the cultivator most likely to reach core formation in our sect, and he even has a chance to advance to nascent soul. It's been more than 1,000 years since a nascent soul cultivator appeared in our Bishuan court. We can't miss this opportunity, even if it's a male cultivator. At the end of her speech, Wei Haolan's face revealed a resolute expression. Mo Tinga couldn't help but admire Wei Haolan. Although she was jealous, she was still able to restrain herself for the sake of the sect. Such a person was indeed suitable to be a sect leader. Sect head Wei's magnanimity is admirable. Wei Haolan shook her head. In fact, I feel very uncomfortable inside. I feel stifled if I don't say it out loud. I know fellow Taoist Yi isn't a talkative person, but it's hard for me to say these words to my fellow martial sisters. A male cultivator is actually the most promising cultivator our Bishuan court has spent all of its resources to cultivate. Even I have to be summoned by the 3 elders to enter this Tao-achieving pagoda. But he broke the rules of this place and started cultivating here as soon as he built his foundation. At this point, Mo Tinga suddenly felt a bit strange. Sect headway, since this fellow Taoist Shangguan has outstanding talents and has always been cultivated with all our might, why does he still look like a middle-aged man? Wei Haolan was dumbfounded but soon smiled. Fellow Taoist Yi came from Kunwu, so you don't know about the situation in Linhai. If there were enough medicinal pills, senior martial brother Shangguan would have long formed his gold core. It's just that he's always lacked medicinal pills and couldn't concoct dustless pills, so he's been delayed for many years. Oh, I see. Mo Tinga finally understood. Wasn't the reason Bishuan court treated her so warmly because of her pill concocting skills? They lacked resources, and their pill concocting skills were also backward. Even talented cultivators would find it hard to stand out. The 2 of them stayed on this floor for a while. Wei Haolan heaved a sigh to relieve her mood before she smiled again. Fellow Taoist Yi, let's go up. The 3rd floor is just above us. Mo Tinga nodded, then followed Wei Haolan into the transporting formation. With a flash of white light, they arrived on the 3rd floor. They're here. Mo Tinga heard a kind voice, so she looked towards the direction of the voice. She saw 3 core formation female cultivators sitting on this floor. The one on the left was Elder Qingmiao. The one on the right looked like she was in her early 30s. She looked well-maintained and was very beautiful. Mo Tinga found some similarities between Tang Shen and her face, so she guessed this must be Elder Qingxi. As for the female cultivator in the middle, she looked the most powerful, so she must be the cultivator with the highest cultivation level in Bishuan court, Elder Qingyi. She looked about the same age as Elder Qingmiao, but she looked much kinder. Wei Haolan led Mo Tinga over, then respectfully greeted the 3 elders. Haolan greets the 3 elders. Elder Qingyi, who was in the middle, smiled and said, "No need to be so polite." Her voice was the same as before. "Thank you, elder." Wei Haolan stood up and introduced them to Mo Tinga. These are the 3 core formation elders of our group. Fellow Taoist, you should have met Elder Qingmiao before. These are Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingxi. Mo Tinga's guess was correct. The one in the middle was Elder Qingyi, and the one on the right was Elder Qingxi. Junior greets the 3 elders. Mo Tinga cupped her hands and saluted them. The 3 elders were interested to see her neither servile nor overbearing manner. Elder Qingyi smiled and said, "Little friend, you doesn't need to be so polite." She then turned to the other 2 elders and said, "Sure enough, you're from a famous cultivation group. You can't find many people with this kind of bearing in our group." Elder Qingmiao nodded. Senior martial sister is right. It seems we have to send more disciples out to gain experience in the future. They'll only grow if they gain more experience. And, speaking of gaining experience, Las Yen and the others have been away for almost 2 years, but there's still no news from them. Mo Tinga's heart skipped a beat when she heard this. but her expression remained unchanged. "Oh right, little friend Yi is here." Elder Qingyi saw Emotinga standing there and said with a smile, "Little friend Yi, please forgive me. I'm old, so I'm a bit muddle-headed." Emotinga smiled and lowered her gaze. "You flatter me. Senior doesn't look old at all. Hee, we're cultivators. How can we take our appearances seriously?" Elder Qingyi chuckled. "Old is old. No matter how well we take care of ourselves, it's useless. However, little friend Yi is very young. It seems you're not even 50 years old yet, right?" Emotienga answered. "Senior has good eyesight. Junior is 39 years old now. Little friend Yi is indeed young and promising. At such a young age, not only do you have outstanding pill concocting skills, but your cultivation level is also in the late stage of the foundation building realm." Emotienga was startled and raised her head. Elder Qingyi, who was still smiling amiably, said slowly, "What's even rarer is that little friend Ye's breath-concealing technique is also so outstanding that even core formation cultivators can't see through it." Chapter 205. Emotinga's smile froze. She stared at the 3 core formation cultivators without saying a word. Among the 3 people in front of them, Elder Qing Miao had a frown on her face, Elder Qingxi had a vigilant look on her face, and Elder Qingyi still had a smile on her face, as if what she said was nothing more than a trivial matter. Wei Haolan, who was standing next to her, widened her eyes in shock. "Elder, you mean?" She turned to look at Emotienga, then slowly took a step back. Although she looked calm on the surface, countless thoughts were flashing through her mind. Zhong Muling once said that with the spirit-concealing pendant he refined again, it wouldn't be a problem, even if she pretended to be immortal. He was one of the most powerful cultivators in the human world, who had reached the soul formation stage for thousands of years. Logically speaking, even nascent soul cultivators shouldn't be able to tell. But how could 3 completion-leveled cultivators see through her real cultivation level? "So what do we do now? Fight?" She wasn't arrogant enough to think she had the ability to escape unscathed under the watchful eyes of 3 great core formation cultivators. Besides, a short time wasn't enough for her to enter the virtual sky world. What else could they do? The 3 core formation cultivators were either expressionless or smiling as they looked at her. But there was a hint of vigilance in their eyes. In the end, Emotienga showed a faint smile. "Senior has good eyes. May I know how you saw through it? Little friend Yi, you're also very calm." Elder Qingyi nodded with a smile. "In fact, there's no harm in telling you." Elder Qingmiao, who was standing on the side, also chuckled. She took over the conversation and said, "Little friend Yi, don't overthink things. This Tao-achieving pagoda is a sacred place established by the founder of Bishuan Court. There are many restrictions and mechanisms inside. Even we, the juniors who inherited it, can't figure them out. One of them is that no matter who enters this tower, all illusions will be seen through by cultivators with higher cultivation. In a way, the breath concealment technique is also an illusion." "I see." She originally thought this primordial lady Bishui was an outstanding talent of her generation. But now it seemed she was also a heaven-gifted genius who wasn't inferior to Wanderer Ziwei. Even though she was well-read, she still hadn't seen this kind of restriction before. When she thought up to this point, Emotienga warned herself inwardly. Even if her aptitude was outstanding, and she had a unique treasure in her hands, she still couldn't underestimate other cultivators. The world was so big, so how many extraordinary people were there? Even if they weren't as talented as her, there were still many who were smarter than her. "You don't seem afraid at all." Elder Qingxi, who had been silent all this while, finally spoke. Her tone was cold, and her gaze was sharp as she stared at Emotienga. Emotienga raised her eyebrows and smiled. "In the beginning, Junior was indeed a bit scared. I didn't expect seniors to suddenly see through my disguise. However, if the 3 of you want to harm me, all you have to do is move your fingers. Why do you have to be so polite? Besides, apart from concealing my cultivation, I haven't done anything detrimental to your sect, so I don't feel guilty." Oh, Elder Qingyi's interest was piqued. "In that case, how do you explain concealing your cultivation level? It's hard to believe that you don't have any malicious intent." Emotinga said unhurriedly. In fact, Senior already told me the reason why Junior concealed my cultivation level. The three elders all revealed puzzled expressions. She continued. When this Junior said that I was 39 years old, the three seniors raised their eyebrows. The reason why this Junior hid my cultivation was because most people would think the same as the three seniors. Oh. Elder Chingy paused and glanced at the other two elders. In the end, the three of them put away their last doubts. With little friend's age, reaching the late stage of the foundation-building realm is indeed too shocking. It's no wonder you were accepted as a disciple by a nascent soul cultivator. Even in the entire celestial pole, such a talent is hard to come by in 1,000 years. A great cultivation group is, after all, a great cultivation group. They were all experienced people who had mingled in the cultivation world for several hundred years. The younger disciples might not have been to Kunwu, but the three core formation elders had definitely seen the world. So how could they not understand what Emotinga said? In addition to pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger, there was also the consideration of protecting oneself. If others misjudged your strength, they might leave you a slim chance of survival when they schemed against you. Elder Chingy sighed inwardly as she watched Emotinga's behavior and listened to what she said. Even though this child was still young, the way she handled things was very steady. In Bishuan Court, there were actually very few people who knew how to handle things cautiously. How could this not make people feel discouraged? Elder Qingmiao and Elder Qingxi also had the same expression. After their doubts were gone, their expressions became solemn again. They were shocked to see a genius that was hard to come by in 1,000 years, but they also thought about Bishuan Court's current situation. On the other hand, they were also wondering whether they should change the way they managed the group. To them, reaching the late stage of the foundation-building realm, at the age of 39, was completely unimaginable. Although they lived in Linhai, they were connected to Kunwu through a transporting formation, so their news wasn't lagging behind. In Kunwu, cultivators who could form their gold core in 100 years were few in 1,000 years, and every one of them was called a genius. That being the case, being in the late stage of the foundation-building realm at the age of 39, she might be able to form her gold core in 20 to 30 years. Forming her gold core at the age of 70 would be a genius among geniuses. However, Xianqing School actually let such a genius among geniuses do as she pleased, allowing her to go out and gain experience by herself. In contrast, Bishuan Court, not to mention having such a genius, even the disciple with mutated spiritual roots they received with great difficulty was carefully kept by their side. For more than 100 years, they never let that disciple leave the sect. Even other foundation-building cultivators with a bit of future didn't dare to leave the sect to gain experience. The three elders silently pondered for a while without saying anything. Wei Haolan, who was standing on the side, kept shifting her gaze between them. At that moment, she couldn't help but step forward and ask, "Elders, is fellow Taoist Yi really in the late stage of the foundation-building realm?" Elder Qingyi nodded. "Haolan, it's good that you know about this. Don't leak it out, lest you get into a lot of trouble." "Yes," Wei Haolan answered in a low voice, then turned her head to look at Emotinga. Her gaze was filled with complicated emotions, but in the end, she just sighed quietly and looked away. Regarding this fellow Taoist Yi, she was originally just envious of her good luck. She was actually a disciple of one of the biggest cultivation groups in the celestial pole. But that was all. With her status as the sect head, she really didn't need to be too fixated on this matter. Unfortunately, she now found out that this fellow Taoist Yi was already a late-stage foundation-building cultivator at such a young age. This was really incomparable. "Little friend Yi, you're so young, but you already have such a profound cultivation level. Why do you also have top-notch pill concocting skills?" Elder Qingmiao asked. Emotinga instantly thought of the answer to this question. To be honest, although my aptitude can be considered excellent, I advanced after I built my foundation, because I obtained fated chances. I didn't immerse myself in cultivation every day. I usually study pill concocting skills to adjust my mood. Besides, Although my pill concocting skills are very brilliant in the eyes of non-pill concocting cultivators, compared to pill concocting cultivation groups like Danding School, they're really nothing. Really? Elder Qingshi's eyes were still filled with doubt. The three of us aren't ignorant frogs at the bottom of a well. In the past we also concocted clear sky pills. At that time, we went to Danding School to find a concocting master. Reportedly, that master's pill concocting realm was already extremely high, but he still couldn't achieve a success rate of 60% or 70%. Fellow Taoist Yi, why is your pill concocting skills better than those of Danding School cultivators, even though you're not a pill concocting cultivator? It's very simple, Emotinga said calmly. Although Danding School is a pill concocting cultivation group, not everyone's aptitude for pill concocting is better than others. In terms of aptitude for pill concocting, Junior is confident I'm not inferior to others. In order to cover up the secret of the virtual sky world, she had to boast. If she said her aptitude for pill concocting wasn't good, who would believe she had a pretty good pill concocting skill? She paused for a moment then continued. Moreover, seniors, please forgive Junior for speaking the truth. In the past, Danding School was at its peak and ranked among the 7 great cultivation groups. They were arrogant and probably didn't take cultivators from small cultivation groups seriously, so they only used ordinary concocting masters to deal with them. Although they were unhappy, the 3 elders could only admit that what she said was the truth. Even though they were all core formation cultivators, Danding School was quite arrogant before it declined. Even Tiandao sect and Xianqing School often needed their help and were polite to them. After a long time, how could they take core formation cultivators from small cultivation groups seriously? Now, after the demonic beast riot, Danding School's strength was greatly reduced. Being ranked among the 7 great cultivation groups was just a habit. Now, it was reduced to a concocting room for the other 6 great cultivation groups. This was also because Danding School was too arrogant in the past. Otherwise, the other 6 great cultivation groups wouldn't have deliberately delayed the rescue time. Unfortunately, Danding School could only swallow this bitter fruit. In the cultivation world, being a person and managing a cultivation group were the same. If you had outstanding strength, it didn't matter if you were arrogant. But if you didn't have enough strength, it was better to keep a low profile. If you had outstanding strength and kept a low profile, that would be even better. In that case, little friend, you just happened to come to our Linhai. It's also our good fortune. Otherwise, it'd be very difficult to find a suitable concocting master in such a short time. Elder Qingmiao glanced at Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingxi then turned around and said with a smile. Emotinga said modestly, speaking of concocting, Junior is only SA. In Kunwu, there are also many great concocting masters, and even great concocting masters. It's just that seniors have been living in Linhai for a long time, so you don't have much contact with them. Upon hearing what she said, Elder Qingyi nodded. Little friend, he is neither arrogant nor rash. My disciples should learn from you. Elder Qingshi's expression was no longer cold, but she still looked solemn as she asked, Little friend Yi, if you go out to gain experience like this, will your master feel at ease? Emotienga was slightly surprised and raised her eyebrows. Junior doesn't quite understand what Senior is saying. Why would my master feel at ease? Elder Qingxi said, with your aptitude, your cultivation level has already reached the late stage of the foundation building realm at such a young age. Presumably, your school also focuses on cultivating a genius disciple, right? Don't tell me your master isn't afraid that something might happen to you when you go out to gain experience? Her words weren't very auspicious, but Elder Qingxi's tone was very gentle, so Emotinga didn't mind. She smiled faintly and said, Senior doesn't know, but Xianqing School is a Dao school. Aside from cultivation level, we also focus on our mental state. Master often tells me that if one's mental state isn't strong enough, they should be cautious during realm breakthroughs. Junior deeply agrees. If we don't go out to gain experience because we're afraid something might happen, then even a genius disciple can't grow into an outstanding cultivator. If we can't truly grow, what's the use of having great aptitude? In the end, cultivation depends on one's cultivation level, realm, and ability in fights of magical powers. It doesn't depend on aptitude to advance all the way to the nascent soul realm. Therefore, even if there are some losses, it's still worth it. Chapter 206. After Enchanting said that, the three core formation elders sank into contemplation. In the end, Elder Chingy heaved a sigh, then waved her hand. You guys can go. Little friendy, thank you very much for your words today. As for the matter of refining pills, we will naturally do our best to cooperate. Enchanting bowed and no longer said anything. Accompanied by Wei Haolan, she stepped into the transporting formation and left the third floor. Upon reaching the second floor, Wei Haolan couldn't help but take a second look at Enchanting. Fellow Taoist Yi, are you really in the late stage of the foundation building realm? When Enchanting saw the vigilance in Wei Haolan's eyes, and recalled what Wei Haolan said to her before they went up, Enchanting knew Wei Haolan was now suspicious of her. However, aside from borrowing the transporting formation, Enchanting didn't have any other requests from Bishuan court. Because of that, she was also frank and open, allowing Enchanting to size her up. That's right. When I'm outside, I have to be careful. I didn't mean to deceive you. Please forgive me, Sect Master Wei. Upon seeing Enchanting's natural demeanor, and the fact that the three elders didn't make things difficult for her, and even spoke to her, Wei Haolan finally stopped thinking about her. Rest assured, fellow Taoist Yi, I'll naturally obey the elders' orders. Even so, Wei Haolan still turned her face away. She must have felt uncomfortable when she realized that the person she was talking about was hiding something from her. Although the two of them could not be considered friends, after so many days together, they had developed a certain level of trust in each other. Some words were spoken because of this trust. Therefore, even though Wei Haolan knew that it was not her fault, she was still unhappy. Enchanting didn't say anything. The two of them walked in silence until they reached the first floor. The middle-aged male cultivator surnamed Shangguan was still there. When he saw them coming down, he stood up and greeted them. Sect head, fellow Taoist Yi. This person was very polite to Enchanting. When they first met, surprise flashed in his eyes. Enchanting originally thought he was used to being polite and courteous to female cultivators in a cultivation group for female cultivators, so she didn't pay much attention to him. In reality, this person had been carefully trained by the three core formation elders. He himself was already in the peak stage of the foundation building realm. Why would he be so polite to a cultivator in the early stage of the foundation building realm? It was naturally because his cultivation level was slightly higher than Enchanting's. So as soon as she came in, he discovered that this fellow Taoist Yi was actually a late-stage foundation building cultivator. Some things could be traced, but they were originally scattered and could not be pieced together. However, if one obtained the answer, one would discover that there were clues everywhere. As she thought up to this point, Enchanting's expression began to waver. Wasn't it the same back then? Before he discovered it, he didn't suspect anything at all. But when he thought about it, he realized that the answer was only natural. However, she still didn't want to face the answer. After all, they wouldn't be related in the future. Fellow Taoist Yi? Wei Haolan's voice rang in his ears. Enchanting regained her train of thought. She cupped her hands to salute the male cultivator, then went down the Dao Achieving Pagoda with Wei Haolan. After exiting the Dao Achieving Pagoda, she raised her head to look at the pagoda floating in the clouds. She couldn't help but sigh. It was actually able to make her spirit-concealing pendant lose its effect. From this, it could be seen how amazing the restrictions in this Dao Attainment Pagoda were. Furthermore, this pagoda was created by a nascent soul female cultivator, who said that female cultivators were inferior to male cultivators. There were also geniuses among them, but there weren't many female cultivators who were willing to work hard. Fellow Taoist Yi, aside from your cultivation level, do you really not have anything else to hide? Wei Haolan also stopped in front of the pagoda and stared at Enchanting. Enchanting shifted her gaze from the pagoda and showed a faint smile. Maybe I'm hiding something, but I can assure Sect Headway that these things are of no importance to Bishuan Court. She also hid her name and master. This was Lord Daoist Jinghe's request. The reason for this was because before she left, Master Song Feng came looking for revenge, and even said he wouldn't let this enmity rest. Although this master of hers cared about his reputation, he wasn't pedantic. He was willing to hide her master's identity to avoid unnecessary danger. For outsiders, however, it didn't matter whose disciple she was in Xianqing school. Wei Haolan stared at her for a long time before she finally withdrew her gaze and accepted Mo Tiange's explanation. That being the case, I won't meddle too much. Fellow Taoist Yi, it won't be a problem to start concocting medicinal pills tomorrow, right? Mo Tiange nodded. No problem. For her, concocting clear sky pills didn't require much preparation. Then I'll take fellow Taoist back. Thank you for your trouble. The two of them walked together without saying a word along the way. When they weren't far from the VIP building, a maid ran towards them in a hurry. When she saw Wei Haolan, her expression was filled with joy, but it was immediately covered with worry. She ran towards Wei Haolan and saluted her. Sect head. Wei Haolan noticed the anxiety in her tone, so she stopped and said to Mo Tiange, Fellow Taoist Yi, I won't be seeing you off. Please don't take offense. Mo Tiange understood what Wei Haolan meant. Sect head Wei, you don't have to be so polite. I'll go back now. Goodbye. The two of them nodded at each other, then Mo Tiange turned around and entered the courtyard. From afar, she could faintly hear the maid's voice. Sect head, another of our disciples is missing. Mo Tiange's heart skipped a beat, but she didn't stop and directly entered the VIP building. Once they saw her coming in, Yilu and Yiqiu both looked happy and rushed towards her. Senior Yi, Mo Tiange was astonished. What's wrong? The two of them looked very anxious, just now as if they'd been waiting for her to come back. Yiqiu turned around and picked up the Feifei from behind. I don't know what's going on, but Feifei hasn't been in high spirits today. Feifei was this Feifei's name. Ever since she received this Feifei, Yilu and Yiqiu asked her to name it. Mo Tiange didn't know how to name it, so since it was a Feifei, she'd just call it Feifei, just like how the Inferno Beast was called Xiaohua. Yilu and Yiqiu protested. How could she name it so casually? But their protests were useless. She was too lazy to give it another name, so she could only call it Feifei. Mo Tiange picked up the Feifei and looked at it. The originally lively little spiritual beast was now dispirited. Its eyes were half closed, and it didn't look like it was sleeping like the day she picked it up. Instead, it looked lethargic. After sensing it with her divine comprehension, she said, It's all right. It's just that I didn't have time to take care of it these days. It's in a bad mood, so it's lethargic. Oh, Yilu and Yiqiu felt relieved, but at the same time, they were reluctant to part with it. I thought Senior couldn't take care of it while you were concocting pills, so we could continue to take care of it. It seems we have to return it to Senior. Mo Tiange smiled but didn't say anything. She picked up the Feifei, took the spiritual fruit Yilu gave her, and personally fed it. Feifei obviously didn't have much appetite and refused to eat. Seeing that it was still lethargic, Yilu and Yiqiu couldn't bear to tease it anymore, so they reluctantly returned it to Mo Tiange. When the two of them left, Mo Tiange specifically told them that she had to rest well and prepare to concoct pills the next day. Yilu and Yiqiu had already received instructions from the sect head, so they immediately said that they wouldn't let anyone disturb them. After the two of them left, Mo Tiange opened the formation in the house and entered the virtual sky world with Feifei in her arms. Once they entered the virtual sky world, Feifei, who was half dead a moment ago, suddenly opened its eyes wide. It jumped down from Mo Tiange's arms and threw itself into the small house. It rolled around on the praying mat, making woo-woo sounds and looking very happy. Mo Tiange couldn't help but laugh. She grabbed a praying mat from the side and sat down. She then reached out to pinch its round nose. You mischievous spirit, you actually wanted to come in, didn't you? A few days ago, she took Feifei into the virtual sky world once. Feifei was as happy as Xiaohua when it came in for the first time. Later, she was busy with concocting pills, so she left it to Yilu and Yiqiu to take care of. She didn't expect that this little guy would never forget about it, and even pretended to be sick. If it weren't for the contract between her and Feifei, she really would have been deceived by it. Speaking of which, were spiritual beasts more sensitive to the space inside the virtual sky world? Xiaohua was like this, and so was Feifei. Or could it be said that all living things were passed down from the distant past era to the present day? Humans gradually became more rational while spiritual beasts retained their instincts, so they had the mark of the distant past era in their bodies? Because of that, they preferred the space from the distant past era, such as this virtual sky world. Feifei raised its head, arched its head next to her, grabbed her clothes with its teeth, and dragged her outside. Emotienga helplessly stood up and followed it. What are you doing? I let you in, so you should behave a little more, right? Although Feifei was intelligent, it was only a first-rank demonic beast. It was inferior to Xiaohua, who had lived in the virtual sky world for many years. Fortunately, she and Feifei had a contract, so she could roughly sense its mood. Emotienga saw it trotting along the ridge of field she opened. As it ran, it sniffed as if it was looking for something. Finally, Feifei stopped under a tree. It was a tree that was entirely yellow, different from ordinary trees. Its yellow color wasn't the yellow of a withered tree that had reached the limit of its life and was about to shed its leaves. Instead, it was a kind of brilliant and colorful golden yellow that was about to be harvested. Its branches and leaves were lush and full of fruits. Emotienga knew this tree was called the flowerless golden tree, and the fruits it bore were called the flowerless golden fruit. It ripened once in 100 years, and its fruits would dry up after being picked. Its fruits and leaves could be used to concoct medicinal pills, but they were high-grade medicinal pills that Emotienga couldn't use right now. There were too many spiritual beasts like this in the virtual sky world, so she was too lazy to care about them. She just let the flowerless golden tree bear fruit, and the fruits fell to the ground and grew into small saplings. At that moment, Feifei circled around the tree, turned its head, and squeaked at Emotienga. Emotienga said, "This flowerless golden fruit can only be taken by cultivators above the nascent soul realm. You're only a first-rank spiritual beast now. What if your spiritual aura explodes after eating it?" Feifei widened its black eyes and glared at her for a while. It then bit the hem of her clothes and squeaked again. Emotienga sensed with her divine sense that Feifei seemed very sure this fruit was harmless to her. She thought for a moment, then nodded. "All right, I'll let you eat one first. If there's nothing wrong, you can eat whatever you want in the future, as long as you don't eat it all up. But if there's something wrong, you're not allowed to touch these spiritual plants carelessly." Feifei raised its head and squeaked happily. It then circled around her left and right. Emotienga smiled, raised her hand, and gently picked one of the fruits. She then crouched down and held it in front of Feifei. "Here, be careful. The spiritual aura inside is very strong." "Woo-woo." Feifei snorted and bit the flowerless golden fruit. The flowerless golden fruit looked a bit like a plum, but its outer skin was golden. When Feifei bit it, the skin immediately broke, revealing the golden flesh inside. It hastily opened its mouth wide and swallowed the fruit in one gulp. It didn't even chew. In the end, it even stuck out its tongue and sucked all the juice that dripped down. Emotienga smelled a very fragrant aroma. This was a unique aroma. It wasn't as intoxicating as the aroma of flowers, nor was it as rich as the aroma of musk and the like. Instead, it was very sweet, carrying the aroma of earth and green leaves. This aroma quickly faded, but it still didn't disperse. It was as if the fur on Feifei's whole body carried this aroma. Feifei was very satisfied after eating the flowerless golden fruit. It lay on the ground, enjoying the gentle breeze, and even rolled around. However, its expression soon turned to one of pain. Emotienga immediately sensed it due to the connection between them. "Feifei." Emotienga looked down and saw that Feifei, who was enjoying itself a moment ago, was now enveloped by a golden aura. This was an extremely strong spiritual aura, even surpassing the spiritual pressure of a nascent soul cultivator. Emotienga was filled with regret. No matter how smart Feifei was, it was only a first-rank spiritual beast that hadn't grown up yet. How could it know that there were some things it could eat, and some things it couldn't? If she had known earlier, she wouldn't have let it eat indiscriminately. Chapter 207. Emotinga rushed back to the hut with Feifei in her arms. For a moment, she didn't know what to do. Feifei was only a small first-rank spiritual beast, so it definitely couldn't bear this spiritual aura. But how could she draw out this spiritual aura? A thought flashed through her mind and Emotinga immediately made a decision. She took out several spirit stones and formation discs, and quickly laid a formation. This was a defensive formation called the dungeon formation, which was most suitable for defending against spiritual aura attacks. However, she made some modifications, hoping to suppress the spiritual aura inside Feifei's body and make it feel better. Then she pressed Feifei's head and probed its body with her spiritual aura to explore the situation inside Feifei's body. This golden aura didn't rebound her spiritual aura, but it was extremely tough and filled all of Feifei's meridians. No matter how Emotinga probed, she couldn't go deep inside. She could only barely enter the entrance of Feifei's meridians and couldn't go any further. After probing for a long time without any results, Emotinga had no choice but to let go. This spiritual aura had exceeded her current ability, so she couldn't do anything about it. In desperation, she could only hold Feifei and feed it healing and analgesic medicinal pills, hoping it would feel better. Time passed bit by bit. At first, Feifei was rolling around in pain, but later on, it no longer had any strength. Its black eyes were wide open, filled with pain. However, Emotinga sensed that this spiritual aura was slowly fading away. Feifei's body seemed to be constantly being transformed, and its pain was also alleviated. Emotinga was shocked. Feifei, hold on. It seemed her animal instincts weren't wrong. This spiritual aura was indeed good for Feifei. Maybe it would be fine after it endured. Feifei whimpered and struggled against this power. Emotinga remembered her situation in the foundation building realm, and said hurriedly, Feifei, maybe you're going to make a realm breakthrough. Don't fight against the spiritual aura, guide it. Although Feifei still couldn't understand her words, its divine comprehension could sense her meaning, so it quickly did as she said. Sure enough, the pain became lighter and lighter, and the spiritual aura flowed into Feifei's meridians. Emotinga breathed a sigh of relief. It's okay now. You just need to guide this spiritual aura well. The advancement of spirit beasts was different from that of humans. Their bodies seemed to possess the primordial memories, and they were naturally sensitive to the fusion of spiritual energy. Therefore, it was much easier for spirit beasts to advance compared to human cultivators. However, due to the lack of spiritual chi in this world, and the fact that very few cultivators could constantly feed their spirit beasts with pills, there were not many high-rank spirit beasts. Right now, Feifei had already extricated itself from the spiritual aura explosion state, and Emotinga also sensed that it was in the process of making a realm breakthrough, so she knew it could be said to be out of danger. A spirit beast's intuition was truly extraordinary. It was able to find a spirit herb that could help it advance after flying for a while. Back then, Xiaohu was also the same. When Emotinga raised it in the virtual sky world, it ate something that made it advance, and even changed its own ardent yang real fire into sun real fire. He didn't know if Feifei would have a special ability after eating this flowerless golden fruit. However, she didn't have time to wait for Feifei to make a realm breakthrough. Bishuan Court was still waiting for her to concoct clear sky pills. Emotinga placed Feifei inside the dungeon formation, letting it make a realm breakthrough on its own, then meditated for a while. After she finished regulating her breath, she pondered for a moment, then tidied up her magic weapons and tools. She didn't know why, but the space between her eyebrows suddenly twitched when she thought about concocting medicinal pills. She put on the heaven and earth cloud silk armor and cloud treading boots, then put the white silk handkerchief, the shuttle of flying Apsara, the enchanting lantern, the land-fleeing ruler, and other things in an easily accessible place. After a moment of hesitation, she also put the 2 stone sculpture puppets into her Qingquan bag in case of emergencies. After she finished doing all this, it was almost time. Seeing that Feifei was doing well, she left the virtual sky world and let it make a realm breakthrough on its own. After all, a realm breakthrough wasn't a matter of 1 or 2 days. It might take more than half a year. Soon after she left the virtual sky world, Ichio called out from outside. Senior Yi, are you ready? She withdrew the defensive formation. She laid here then walked out of the room. Ilu and Ichio were already waiting outside. All right, let's go. Yes. When she arrived at the concocting room, she saw that the 3 core formation elders were already waiting for her. Emotinga stepped forward to greet them. Greetings to the 3 seniors. The 3 of them nodded. Elder Chingy smiled and said, Little friend, you doesn't need to be overly courteous. We'll have to rely on you today. Emotinga smiled and cupped her hands in greeting. She no longer bothered with pleasantries and went to check on the preparations. Fellow Taoist Yi, Xiaqing walked towards her. Emotinga was startled. Xiaqing looked exhausted. Her eyes were lifeless, and her voice was hoarse. Fellow Taoist Xia, what happened to you? Xiaqing rubbed her eyes and said, It's nothing. I'm just too tired. You're going to concoct medicinal pills today. Shouldn't you have rested well yesterday? Wei Haolan walked over from the side and said with a smile. Junior Marshal Sister Xia was busy preparing the materials for several days. But yesterday, she was too excited and couldn't enter a meditative state. In the end, she ended up like this. Emotienga was stunned. She thought only mortals would be like this. Even if cultivators were very excited, they could still enter a meditative state with a bit of restraint. In particular, Xiaqing was a foundation-building cultivator. Alas, she could only say that Xiaqing was too obsessed with concocting medicinal pills. Xiaqing said, I can't calm down when I think about concocting clear sky pills. Forget it, I'll just observe today. I'll mainly watch fellow Taoist Yi concoct medicinal pills. Emotinga could only say, In that case, fellow Taoist Xia can just watch from the side. Xiaqing nodded. She raised her spirits and continued to instruct the disciples. Wei Haolan came over and said, Fellow Taoist Yi, take a look and see what's missing. If there's nothing else, we can start. Emotienga examined the prepared spiritual plants and pill furnace. After muttering to herself for a moment, she laid a simple spirit-gathering formation around the pill furnace and said, Okay, we can start. Wei Haolan looked at her spirit-gathering formation with a hint of surprise on her face. She then nodded and went to invite the 3 elders. Fellow Taoist Xia. Upon hearing her voice, Xiaqing hastily came over. Fellow Taoist Yi, is there something wrong? You can ask the unrelated people to leave. We're going to start concocting medicinal pills. Okay. Xiaqing was excited. She turned around and shouted at the part-time disciples. That'll do. All of you can go out and wait outside. No matter what happens, you're not allowed to come in. Yes, it was rare for them to see a high-level core formation medicinal pill being concocted, but they couldn't just stand by and watch. These part-time disciples were reluctant to leave, but they didn't dare to disobey, so they left. Elder Qingxi then came over. Little friend Yi, what should I do? Emotienga said, Senior, sit here. You only need to use your Dantian real fire. Elder Qingxi nodded and sat cross-legged next to the pill furnace. Emotienga looked up and saw Elder Qingmiao sitting cross-legged on the side, while Elder Qingyi went to the door. She pulled Wei Haolan over and asked in a low voice, Sect Head Wei, what's Elder Qingyi doing? Wei Haolan said, The elders decided that Elder Qingyi will stand guard while the other 2 elders will take turns providing the concocting fire. Oh, Emotienga nodded. The elders are really thoughtful. It'd be best if there's an elder to stand guard at all times. In any case, 2 elders were enough to provide the concocting fire. Wei Haolan nodded. Fellow Taoist Yi, you can start. I won't disturb you anymore. Emotienga turned around and said to Elder Qingxi, Senior, let's start. Elder Qingxi clasped her palms together, operated her spiritual aura, and pushed her right palm horizontally. A wisp of spiritual aura gushed out from her palm, and immediately turned into Dantian real fire, rushing towards the bottom of the furnace. A core formation cultivator's Dantian real fire was many times better than the earth fire in this place, so the pill furnace almost immediately heated up. Emotienga opened the pill furnace and quickly threw several kinds of spiritual plants inside. She then closed the pill furnace and concentrated on sensing the situation of the spiritual plants inside with her divine sense. Several kinds of spiritual plants soon turned into liquid and mixed together, emitting a strong medicinal fragrance. Although the speed wasn't as fast as when she used sun-real fire, it was still many times faster than when she used earth fire. In fact, if she used the purple wooden cauldron to concoct clear sky pills, she could probably finish concocting them in half a day, but she absolutely couldn't take out the purple wooden cauldron. Not to mention that it was a magic weapon used by a deification cultivator. Just the sunstone she sealed inside was already very precious. Inside the pill furnace, several kinds of medicinal liquids were undergoing drastic changes. Emotienga sat cross-legged with her eyes closed, but her divine sense never once relaxed, paying close attention to the changes inside the furnace. At this moment, Elder Chingy was standing guard outside the door. All the part-time disciples had already been driven away, so there were only 5 people left inside the concocting room. Emotienga was paying close attention to the inside of the pill furnace. Elder Qingxi was concentrating on using her Dantian real fire, while Elder Qingmiao, Wei Haolan, and Xia Qing were watching the concocting process without blinking. Time passed slowly. Elder Qingxi's complexion gradually turned pale. She had been using her Dantian real fire for 6 hours, so she had already consumed a lot of her spiritual aura. Emotienga opened her eyes. Upon seeing this situation, she said, "Senior Qingmiao, please come and take Senior Qingxi's place." Upon hearing her voice, Elder Qingmiao stood up and walked over. She then sat next to Elder Qingxi and used her spiritual aura to force out her Dantian real fire. In a split second, Elder Qingxi withdrew her Dantian real fire. With Wei Haolan's support, she sat next to Elder Qingxi and began to meditate to recover her spiritual aura. Emotienga took a look. Elder Qingmiao's and Elder Qingxi's Dantian real fires were almost the same. This was better than she expected. Although the difference wasn't big, the more stable the concocting fire was, the better it was. That way, there wouldn't be any uncontrollable changes to the spiritual medicines. Seniors, you can decide when to switch next. It's best if you don't use up all your spiritual aura before switching. That way, it'll be easier for you to recover. Elder Qingmiao nodded, then concentrated on sending her Dantian real fire. Once she felt the materials inside the furnace were almost full, Emotienga opened the lid and put most of the materials inside. She then quickly closed the lid, sat on the side, and began to make hand seals. Soul-solidifying pills were relatively easy to concoct, but clear sky pills could definitely be considered high-grade medicinal pills, so they needed to be matched with many hand seals. The incomparably complicated hand seals were made one after another, almost without any pause. They were like floating clouds and flowing water, causing Xia Qing, who was watching from the side, to widen her eyes. Such complicated hand seals required a very long time to practice. Xia Qing admitted she was still a bit lacking. She really didn't know how talented this fellow Taoist Yi was in pill concocting. She wasn't a concoctions master specializing in pill concocting, but she was even better than her. In fact, Emotienga also practiced. Her pill concocting talent was very ordinary, but she concocted a lot of medicinal pills. Moreover, all of them were high-grade medicinal pills, which was how she managed to practice making hand seals. She recalled seeing Qin Shi's hand seal technique years ago. At that time, she was already gasping in amazement. It was only after she started concocting that she realized she still underestimated him. He had such exquisite hand seal technique, and he even memorized it after seeing it once. His pill concocting skills were much higher than hers. So how could an ordinary aura refining cultivator, who'd just built his foundation, possibly achieve this? She sighed inwardly, then closed her eyes, concentrating on sensing the condition of the concocting furnace. Chapter 208. She made several hand seals one after another, and spiritual aura, which was almost tangible, hit the pill furnace. The spiritual medicines inside the furnace began to change violently. Emotienga closed her eyes and used her divine sense to observe the medicinal liquid inside the furnace. Dozens of materials dissolved and fused. Because of the hand seals, the changes became more and more intense. This was the pill melting process. It would last for a long time. And when the changes stopped, it would be the moment the pills were formed. Therefore, in the next few days, she had to wait like this. From time to time, she would make hand seals to urge the materials to fuse and drain out the impurities. Time passed bit by bit. Elder Qingmiao and Elder Qingxi would take turns every 6 hours. Elder Qingyi had been guarding the door. Xia Qing was recording Mo Tiange's pill concocting steps and learning her hand seals, while Wei Haolan was assisting her. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. The materials inside the furnace were finally fused together smoothly. Mo Tiange wiped the sweat on her forehead and heaved a sigh of relief. However, she soon regained her full concentration and made several hand seals to form the pills. This was the last day. Whether she would succeed or fail would depend on this moment. The medicinal liquid inside the furnace began to slowly gather and solidify. "Who are you?" Elder Qingyi's shout was accompanied by a strange wave of energy fluctuations. The expressions of the 5 people inside the concocting room changed. This was the crucial moment of pill concocting. What happened? When that strange fluctuation became clearer and clearer, Mo Tiange was greatly shocked. She could already feel it. It was Ren Yufeng. When she arrived at Linhai, she didn't find any trace of Ren Yufeng. Nothing happened in the past 3 months, so Mo Tiange almost thought he was washed away by the waves. But now, Ren Yufeng appeared at this crucial moment. Nevertheless, she quickly calmed down. With 3 core formation cultivators here, Ren Yufeng wouldn't be able to gain any advantage. Although Elder Qingxi's spiritual aura was almost exhausted because she used her Dantian real fire, Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao were still in good condition. With 2 core formation elders here, Ren Yufeng's cultivation level was improper, so he definitely couldn't win. Elder Qingmiao, who was meditating, frowned and said seriously, "I'll go take a look. You two stay calm." "Yes," Wei Haolan and Xia Qing answered. The 2 of them consciously ran to the door just in case. Mo Tiange also calmed down and continued concocting. Miserable cries rang out from outside, followed by the sounds of fighting. "Are you a devil path cultivator?" Elder Qingyi shouted. Originally, she was just guessing, but upon hearing this voice, Mo Tiange was now certain that it was indeed Ren Yufeng. "What demonic cultivator? I'm the divine dragon's son." Ren Yufeng's tone was arrogant and conceited. "Son of the divine dragon." Elder Qingyi's voice was filled with doubt. "Senior sister." Elder Qingmiao walked out of the concocting room and said, "What divine dragon's son? In my opinion, he's a cultivator from the devil path. He even injured our disciple, so there's no need to say anything. Just kill him." "Not bad," Elder Qingyi answered. "He's covered in devil aura, but he's still not a cultivator from the devil path. He actually injured our group's disciples. There's no need to be polite to him." "You," Ren Yufeng was furious. "How dare you slander me? I am the son of the divine dragon. I am the son of the divine dragon." The fluctuation of spiritual energy was even more intense. Mo Tiange knew they must be fighting, so she said to Elder Qingxi, "Senior, let's speed up so we can finish refining faster. Please strengthen your real fire." Elder Qingxi, who also sensed the danger outside, nodded. "All right, I'll have to trouble little friend Yi." As she said that, she urged her spiritual aura, and the real fire in her Dantian immediately became a bit thicker. Mo Tiange was also rapidly making hand seals. Although she felt the 2 core formation cultivators could definitely stop Ren Yufeng, she still had to be prepared just in case. Suddenly strengthening the concocting fire would impact the medicinal liquid inside the pill furnace. Mo Tiange used hand seals to weaken the impact while speeding up the concoction of the medicinal pills. "Sect head Wei, what's the situation outside?" Mo Tiange had no time to spread her divine sense while paying attention to the concoction of the pill furnace, so she had to ask Wei Haolan. Wei Haolan, who was standing at the door, stuck her head out to take a look. This devil cultivator is very strong in fights of magical power. But rest assured, fellow Taoist Yi, the 2 elders can handle him." "That's good." Mo Tiange felt a bit relieved. She also felt Ren Yufeng couldn't defeat the 2 elders, but she kept feeling the space between her eyebrows twitching. It wasn't a good sign. Yi Haolan said. Emotinga tilted her head. What's wrong? It's Senior Marshal Brother Shangguan, Yi Haolan said. Senior Marshal Brother Shangguan has reached the peak stage of the foundation building realm. I hope he can help the two elders. Emotinga wrinkled her brows when she heard what he said. Her intuition told her something was wrong. Master, Marshal Uncle Qingmiao, I've come to help you. This was fellow Taoist Shangguan's voice. Yunhao, why did you come here instead of at the Tao Achieving Pagoda? Elder Qingyi's voice sounded a bit strict. Right, why did he happen to come here? Shangguan Yunhao answered. I just sensed a strange aura in the Tao Achieving Pagoda, so I followed it here. In front of a formidable enemy, Elder Qingyi couldn't blame him. She just said, then quickly come here. This devil cultivator's divine power is extraordinary, be careful. Although the peak stage of the foundation building realm was only a step away from the core formation realm, it was actually a lot weaker. Elder Qingyi really doted on this disciple. She was worried about him the moment he arrived, afraid he would get hurt. Senior Marshal Sister Sect Head, Xia Qing asked in a low voice. Where did this devil cultivator come from? Is there a flaw in our Bishuan Court's great sect protecting formation? Wei Haolan wrinkled her brows. Correct. According to reason, we should have known the moment this devil cultivator entered our great sect protecting formation. How could he suddenly appear in the concocting room? Mo Tiange once heard Yi Lu and Yi Qiu say that the west side of Linhai was a branch of Demonic Mountain. Demonic Mountain not only had a towering main peak, but it also had many complicated branches. Those devil cultivators of the Path of Devil lived in these mountain ranges. The reason why Linhai cultivators didn't dare to go to Kunwu through Demonic Mountain was not only because they were afraid of running into high-level devil cultivators, but also because the terrain of these mountain ranges was peculiar. They basically couldn't jump over them. All these years, no devil cultivators had ever reached Linhai for the same reason. Sect Headway, Emotinga said. This person is the enemy I told you about. He has a strange temperament and willfully kills innocent people. You must be careful. Since Ren Yufeng had already degenerated into a devil cultivator, his temperament must have also changed. During that year, Emotinga saw that he was irritable and capricious, so she knew he'd become a genuine devil cultivator. Wei Haolan's and Xia Qing's expressions changed at the same time. Although they knew about this matter, in the past few months, they didn't see any traces of devil cultivators, so they didn't take it seriously. They never expected that they'd actually come knocking on their door. Ah! A scream suddenly came from outside. Judging from the voice, it was Elder Qingyi. Wei Haolan was shocked. She looked outside, and her expression changed. Senior Marshal Brother Shangguan. She didn't need to say anything, because Elder Qingmiao's angry voice came from outside. Shangguan Yunhao, what are you doing? What am I doing? Shangguan Yunhao's voice also became gloomy. Of course I'm killing you. Everyone inside the concocting room was stunned. Elder Qingxi was even more shocked. Her hands trembled, and she coughed up a mouthful of blood. Elder Qingxi, Wei Haolan and Xia Qing's expressions changed as they rushed over. Emotinga couldn't help but sigh when she heard a muffled sound from inside the furnace. At the last moment, the concoction of the clear sky pill failed. But now wasn't the time to worry about this. She took out a healing medicinal pill from inside her robe and gave it to Wei Haolan. Quickly give this to Senior Qingxi. Also take a restorative panacea. Since Elder Qingyi was plotted against, she could only try her best to preserve Elder Qingxi's strength. Shangguan Yunhao. Although Elder Qingyi's voice was a bit weak, it was very fierce. The three of us have always treated you well. Why are you biting the hand that feeds you? Treated me well? Shangguan Yunhao's voice was polite and restrained before, but this time it was full of ridicule. If you really treated me well, then why haven't I formed my gold core at 170 years old? It's not like you don't know about the lack of resources in Linhai, Elder Qingmiao said coldly. But ever since we accepted you as our disciple, you've always been the first to get medicinal pills. You've just built your foundation, but we already let you enter the Tao Achieving Pagoda. When you reached the peak stage of the foundation building realm, we always sent disciples to Kunwu to look for dustless pills. Bishwan Court is only a small cultivation group, but we've always treated you 10 times better than other disciples. Is there anything you're dissatisfied with? Dissatisfied? Of course I'm dissatisfied. Shangguan Yunhao let out a humph. He obviously didn't agree with Elder Qingmiao's statement. Correct. As soon as I entered the sect, you gave me pointers. As soon as I reached the 10th layer of the aura refining realm, you gave me foundation building pills. However, you treated me so well only because I was the disciple with the best aptitude Bishwan Court accepted in the past several hundred years. What happened after that? After I reached the peak stage of the foundation building realm, you delayed giving me dustless pills and didn't let me form my gold core. Just like that, you trapped me in the peak stage of the foundation building realm for 50 years. 50 years. 50 years ago, I asked you to let me go to Kunwu so I could look for dustless pills or some fated chances on my own. But what did you do? You'd rather send disciples with no future to Kunwu than let me go out. Weren't you just afraid I wouldn't come back after I went to Kunwu? Because you were afraid you couldn't control me. You made me unable to form my gold core for 50 years. Upon hearing what he said, Wei Haolan's expression changed. She stood up and walked out of the concocting room. Shangguan Yunhao, check your conscience. The elders didn't let you go out because they were worried about your safety. We have so many martial sisters and junior sisters who always run around for your dustless pills. From the moment you entered the sect, did we ever ask you to do anything? No, not only did we not, but we also provided you with everything you needed for your cultivation. It's fine if you don't feel grateful, but you actually made a false accusation. Because of me. Shangguan Yunhao sneered. Wei Haolan, don't you feel guilty saying this? 40 years ago, the former sect head abdicated, and I wanted to be the sect head. With my qualifications and cultivation level, why did the position of sect head fall into your hands in the end? Moreover, you didn't even allow me to take a step out of the group. You imprisoned me in disguise. Shangguan Yunhao. Wei Haolan was furious. Our Bishwan Court is a cultivation group for female cultivators. Every generation of sect heads has been a female cultivator. Is letting you be the sect head going to provoke others? Yes, that's it. Shangguan Yunhao said sarcastically. Just because I'm a male cultivator, you're always on guard against me. Don't think I don't know. In fact, you already got your hands on dustless pills a few years ago. You just didn't let me make a realm breakthrough smoothly. On guard against you? Elder Qingyi finally spoke. She coughed then continued to say, correct, I'm on guard against you. Elder Qingyi. Wei Haolan was bewildered. When you fought against Haolan for the position of sect head, I could already see your intentions weren't right. Therefore, at that time, I didn't let you go out and didn't immediately give you dustless pills. But why do you think I did that? If you didn't grind away your greed and didn't cultivate your mental state, you'd fall because of your inner demon if you wanted to form your gold core. Chapter 209. Mo Tiange walked over softly and looked outside through the crack in the door. There was blood on Elder Qingyi's chest, but she was still standing, and Elder Qingmiao was on guard beside her. Shangguan Yunhao, who was standing not too far away, looked resentful. Ren Yufeng, on the other hand, was watching their quarrel with interest as if it had nothing to do with him. Don't think I'll believe you. Shangguan Yunhao's face twisted. My heart is evil? You're clearly biased. Yes, we're biased. Elder Qingmiao stared at him with a sharp gaze. We're really blind to be biased towards a heartless and unscrupulous thing like you. Lin Hai is so short of resources, but we gave you a share of everything first. We didn't ask you to do anything, and only told you to focus on cultivating. But in the end we raised an ingrate. The three elders watched Shangguan Yunhao grow up. Now that Elder Qingmiao's gaze was sharp, his momentum weakened, and his eyes also started to shrink. Ren Yufeng chuckled softly. His devilish eyes swept over the female cultivators in front of him. If that's the case, why didn't they let you go to Kunwu? Upon hearing that, Shangguan Yunhao stuck out his chest again. Right. You obviously had no choice but to cultivate me for the sake of the group's future. You were afraid I wouldn't go back to Linhai after going to Kunwu. So you wanted me to be trapped in Linhai for the rest of my life. Nevertheless, Emotianga knew this reason. When she went to the Tao Achieving Pagoda to see the three elders a few days ago, she already heard from them that Bishuan court was short of talents. So they didn't dare to let their disciples with high aptitudes go out to gain experience. This wasn't the reason Shangguan Yunhao mentioned at all. This Shangguan Yunhao's heart was really evil. Did he think he could be flattered everywhere, just because he had mutated spiritual roots? In Kunwu, every cultivation group indeed wanted to accept mutated spiritual roots. But if he thought he had mutated spiritual roots and relied on the group for everything, he'd only be looked down upon by others. Even if Bishuan court was short of resources, with the strength of a group, how bad could he be if he fully supported his cultivation? This was probably the best a small or medium-sized cultivation group in Kunwu could do. However, if it was a big cultivation group, even if they accepted disciples with mutated spiritual roots, they definitely wouldn't treat him as leniently as Bishuan court did. If his cultivation level couldn't meet the cultivation group's requirements, the number of spirit stones and medicinal pills he received would be reduced. If he failed to live up to expectations, no one could save him. That was why it was said that superior aptitude was a gift from the heavens. However, in the end, one still had to rely on one's own hard work. Those who relied on their outstanding aptitude to feel that everything was given to them by others would never be able to achieve the immortal Tao. Qingmiao, don't talk to him anymore. Elder Qingyi snorted in a low voice. This kind of heartless and unscrupulous thing always blames other people's fault if he can't obtain anything. He never thought that from the moment he entered the sect, everything he has today was given by us. Not bad. Elder Qingmiao's expression also became indifferent. She stared at Shangguan Yunhao with an indifferent gaze. Obviously, she didn't have the slightest bit of hope. Us three martial sisters are really failures. After more than 100 years, we only managed to teach this kind of thing. The conversation between the two elders made Shangguan Yunhao seethe with anger. Not only did you not repent, you even said that There were some people in this world who held grudges, but didn't remember kindness. They never thought about how much others had given them. Instead, they always thought about how much others could still give them. If they didn't give them everything they could, they would feel that others had let them down. Therefore, even if they wanted to show kindness, they still had to see who the person was. If some people treated them well, not only would they not feel grateful, but they would also think they were stupid. They would be delusional enough to want more from you, otherwise they would be letting them down. 1 liter of rice was a favor, but 1 bucket of rice was a grudge. This saying wasn't unreasonable. Shangguan Yunhao, Wei Haolan said coldly, did you collude with this devil cultivator? Shangguan Yunhao's gaze was gloomy and cold. He didn't get the sect head's position, so he harbored intense hatred towards Wei Haolan. Yes, he promised to take me away from Linhai. I've long had enough. These days, some of our sect's disciples went missing from time to time. Was it him or you? So what if I did it? Shangguan Yunhao didn't feel guilty at all. It's not a pity for those idiots to die. It's better to give them to senior run for cultivation. It can also be considered recycling waste. Then there's nothing else to say. Wei Haolan waved her hand, summoning a bronze mirror. Elder Qingyi was ambushed, because she wasn't on guard against you. Now I'll deal with you. I want to see how strong you, the #1 foundation building disciple of Bishuan court, are. Shangguan Yunhao's expression changed. You overestimate yourself. Wei Haolan, you stole my sect head's position. So today, I'll let you see my strength. As he said that, he also summoned his magic tool. Mo Tiange had never seen Wei Haolan fight, but now that she saw it, she actually wasn't weak at all. Elder Qingyi's gaze was cold as she watched the two of them fighting. This traitor thinks he's amazing. It's good to let Haolan teach him a lesson. We used to protect him, because we didn't want him to suffer any setbacks. Now it seems we were too lenient. Elder Qingmiao lowered her gaze and sighed. She then asked worriedly, Senior Martial Sister, are your injuries all right? They're fine. I won't die. Elder Qingyi lowered her hand that was covering her chest. Let's deal with the enemy first. All right. The two martial sisters shifted their gazes towards Ren Yufeng. Both of them summoned their magic weapons. Mo Tiange could see that although Wei Haolan's cultivation level wasn't as high as Shangguan Yunhao's, her fighting ability was very strong. She probably wouldn't lose to him. As for Elder Qingyi, she was a middle-stage core formation cultivator after all. Even if she was ambushed, how could a late-stage foundation-building cultivator possibly injure her? Therefore, her injuries weren't serious. Now that the two elders joined hands, Mo Tiange reckoned she was still a bit stronger than Ren Yufeng. However, when she examined Ren Yufeng carefully, she discovered that the black aura on his body had become even denser. She then recalled what Shangguan Yunhao said about the missing Bishuan court disciples. This Ren Yufeng had indeed embarked on the path of devil cultivators. He actually used human corpses to cultivate. Ren Yufeng was currently confronting Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao. All of a sudden, he cast a glance at the concocting room and said gloomily, Yi Xiaotian, junior martial sister Yi, we haven't seen each other for several months. Why are you hiding? Since Ren Yufeng and Shangguan Yunhao were colluding, Mo Tiange didn't think she could hide her whereabouts from him. Although she had the temperament to put her own safety before things went awry, she couldn't learn to push the blame away and disregard other people's lives. Therefore, she boldly pushed open the door of the concocting room and walked out. Ren Yufeng, I'm right here. Do you have any advice for me? When Ren Yufeng called her junior martial sister, bewilderment flitted across Elder Qingyi's and Elder Qingmiao's faces. However, when they saw that Mo Tiange was full of vigilance towards Ren Yufeng, their expressions finally relaxed. I wouldn't dare to advise you. Ren Yufeng stared at her with a smile on his face. However, his whole body was now covered in devil aura, so his smile looked even more terrifying. I really didn't expect this. I couldn't find you back then, and thought you escaped with Jiang Shuihan and the others. As it turns out, you actually came to the Eastern Sea with me. Could it be that you've been hiding in the underground palace for a whole year? Correct. It wasn't a big deal to say this out loud. Ren Yufeng, I've been hiding in the underground palace for a whole year. But you didn't notice me at all. Junior martial sister Yi deserves to be the brilliant disciple of a nascent soul lord Taoist from Xianqing school. Ren Yufeng's expression twisted. He thought he'd obtained power, but in the end, he was fooled by a foundation-building cultivator. The anger in his heart could be imagined. But today, don't even think about escaping. Mo Tiange sneered. I'll return those words to you. You're sinister, cunning, and harboring evil intentions. As an elite disciple of Zhengfa sect, you used your fellow disciple to burn the bridge after crossing the river. You even schemed everywhere and wanted to kill me to silence me. I, Yi Xiaotian, am not a weak woman who can be bullied and won't fight back. Since you schemed against me, I'll give you a tooth for a tooth. Ha 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 ha. Ren Yufeng threw his head back and laughed. Once he finished laughing, he said with a gloomy expression, What I hate the most is you so-called proud sons of heaven, who look down on others, because you think your aptitudes are high. You want to kill me? What a joke. A mere foundation-building cultivator also wants to kill me. Mo Tiange ignored his mockery. She turned towards Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao and said, Seniors, does what sect head Wei promised me still count? When Wei Haolan asked her to teach Xiaqing pill concocting, one of her conditions was to ensure her safety. Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao already knew this devil cultivator was a deranged person. Even if they stayed out of this matter, this devil cultivator and Bishuan court would never forgive each other. Besides, that missing disciple was also because of this devil cultivator, so the hatred between them had long been formed. Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao immediately said to Mo Tiange, Rest assured, little friend Yi. Since we promised, we naturally keep our word. As they spoke, Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao stepped forward. Humph. Ren Yufeng let out a cold humph and cast a glance at Mo Tiange. I'll deal with these two old women first, then I'll deal with you. Arrogant. Elder Qingyi shouted in response to those words. Even though devil cultivators were slightly stronger than righteous path cultivators in fights of magical power, Ren Yufeng was only an early-stage core formation cultivator. Elder Qingyi was in the middle stage of the core formation realm, while Elder Qingmiao was in the early stage of the core formation realm. There was absolutely no reason for them to lose when it was 2 against 1. Whether I'm arrogant or not, I'll show you. With a ferocious expression, Ren Yufeng formed an art with both hands. In an instant, a sphere formed from black devil aura appeared in front of his chest. Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao didn't dare to be careless. Each of them released a protective spiritual light and summoned their magic weapons. Elder Qingyi's weapon was a jade bottle with a willow branch stuck in it. She picked up the willow branch and brushed it, spilling several drops of sweet dew. The spiritual aura in front of them flickered, forming a spiritual aura net that blocked in front of Ren Yufeng. At that moment, Ren Yufeng's devil aura ball was already spinning crazily. He let out a cold humph and swept his gaze over everyone in front of him contemptuously. He then pushed the devil aura ball forward. Boom! The spiritual aura net formed by Elder Qingyi's magic weapon blocked the devil aura ball. But an extremely strong spiritual aura fluctuation burst out from it. Ah! 2 screams rang out. They didn't come from Elder Qingyi or Elder Qingmiao, but from Wei Haolan and Shangguan Yunhao, who were fighting on the side. Mo Tiange was smart enough to hide behind the 2 elders, so she wasn't affected by the fight. Haolan! Upon seeing that Wei Haolan was sent flying, Elder Qingmiao swung the golden rope in her hand, bound Wei Haolan and pulled her back. Shangguan Yunhao, on the other hand, didn't have such good luck. He fell heavily on the ground, spitting out a mouthful of blood. He then pointed at Ren Yufeng. Senior, run you. Ren Yufeng looked at him as if he was looking at an ant. His eyes were filled with contempt. Since you're useless, you can go die. Anger emerged on Shangguan Yunhao's face. You didn't keep your promise. Humph. Ren Yufeng cast him a cold glance and only said one word. Naive. Shangguan Yunhao's eyes widened. His face was filled with unwillingness, but in the end, he still breathed his last. Mo Tiange stared at his corpse without the slightest trace of pity. She didn't sympathize with people who couldn't see their own position and only knew how to endlessly demand things. Chapter 210. Ren Yufeng had long known Shangguan Yunhao would end up like this. What he hated the most was talented cultivation group disciples. But Shangguan Yunhao just happened to have this kind of temperament. How could he possibly sincerely cooperate with Shangguan Yunhao? Not only did he have no self-awareness, but he was also as stupid as a pig. Shangguan Yunhao didn't feel wronged at all for falling into such a situation. However, a trace of sadness flitted across Elder Qingyi's and Elder Qingmiao's faces when they saw his corpse. He was, after all, the disciple they'd cultivated for more than 100 years. How could they remain indifferent upon seeing him die in someone else's hands? Ren Yufeng stared at the female cultivators in front of him and smiled gloomily. He's dead, so it's your turn now. Elder Qingmiao pushed Wei Haolan to Mo Tiange, then swung the golden rope in her hand and sneered. Who knows whose turn it will be? Then let's try. Ren Yufeng used his devil aura again. Seeing that they were fighting again, Mo Tiange helped Wei Haolan to a corner. Sect head Wei, are you alright? Wei Haolan coughed up a mouthful of blood and said with difficulty, Don't talk first. Mo Tiange took out a healing medicinal pill and fed it to her. There are 2 elders here, so you should heal first. Wei Haolan nodded, swallowed the medicinal pill, then sat down cross-legged without saying anything. Mo Tiange looked up and saw Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao fighting with Ren Yufeng. In the current situation, although Ren Yufeng was strong, Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao weren't at a disadvantage. Moreover, they had a good tacit understanding with each other, so their chances of winning were relatively high. However, Mo Tiange felt something was wrong. Ren Yufeng was too confident. He might have colluded with Shangguan Yunhao in the beginning, but he obviously didn't take Shangguan Yunhao seriously at all. He probably just wanted to learn about Bishuan Court's situation from Shangguan Yunhao and use him to crack Bishuan Court's restrictions and formations. Then the question was, where did his confidence come from? Mo Tiange couldn't figure it out. Nevertheless, she was never the type to sit and wait for death. After she felt something was wrong, she took out a simple formation and laid a 4 symbols 100 flowers formation around her. After that, she placed several magic weapons and magic tools in the most accessible places. She also held the magic talismans Lord Taoist Jinghe prepared for her in her hands. Soon after, she carefully observed the situation of their fight of magical power. If there was a life-threatening moment, she planned to directly enter the virtual sky world. Although she had a lot of treasures with her, the gap between the core formation realm and the foundation building realm was too big. If Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao couldn't hold on, she would have no choice but to save her own life first. Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao cooperated very well. Elder Qingyi's jade bottle focused on defense, while Elder Qingmiao's golden rope focused on offense. One of them attacked while the other defended, and one advanced while the other retreated. Their teamwork was flawless. Ren Yufeng couldn't gain the slightest bit of advantage, so he immediately looked impatient. After fighting for a while, Ren Yufeng finally couldn't endure it anymore. He used a wisp of devil aura to block Elder Qingmiao's attack and said coldly, "These two old women are quite skilled. It seems I'll have to use my trump card." She guessed Ren Yufeng definitely had something to rely on, but she didn't know what kind of cultivation technique he practiced in the end. Just like before, Elder Qingyi sprayed her willow branch with a layer of spiritual fog, which then turned into a protective spiritual light. Ren Yufeng sneered, "A grain of light dares to compete with the sun and the moon? I'll show you what I can do." Right after he finished speaking, he made a series of hand seals with both hands. A wisp of pure devil aura filled his whole body in an instant, moving around his whole body. This devil aura was unusual. Emotinga stared at Ren Yufeng and saw that his momentum suddenly changed. It was as if his cultivation level suddenly rose sharply. However, she wasn't a core formation cultivator, so she couldn't see which stage Ren Yufeng's cultivation level had risen to. Qingmiao Black Tortoise Shield. Elder Qingyi reacted very quickly and immediately shouted. Elder Qingmiao immediately took out an extremely small shield-like magic weapon. With a wave of her hand, the shield flew into the air and expanded in an instant. Ren Yufeng stared coldly at the scene in front of him. Overestimating yourself. When Mo Tiange saw his expression, she instinctively took out the white silk handkerchief, which turned into a brick wall in front of her. Ren Yufeng attacked. The devil ball was thrown again, but this time, its momentum was much stronger than before. With a loud boom, the devil aura collided with Elder Qingyi's spiritual fog and Elder Qingmiao's black tortoise shield. Mo Tiange felt dizzy. Her whole body flew backwards and fell against the wall uncontrollably. After a while she struggled to crawl up. There was a deep fear in her eyes. This momentum definitely wasn't that of an early-stage core formation cultivator. Apparently, Ren Yufeng must have cultivated some kind of secret technique in the past few months to have this kind of ability. If she hadn't laid the 4 symbols 100 flowers formation and had the white silk handkerchief in front of her, she definitely wouldn't have just suffered some minor injuries. She'd most likely have lost her life just like that. Ever since she obtained the white silk handkerchief, Mo Tiange had faced 5th-ranked demonic beasts before, but she'd never suffered such heavy injuries after blocking them. Cough. She wasn't the only one who suffered heavy injuries. Behind her, Wei Haolan, who was already heavily injured, now tilted her head and lost consciousness. Mo Tiange turned around and saw that Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao were still standing. However, one of them was still in a state of shock because her magic weapon had been shattered, while the other one was already injured. So she was now vomiting a mouthful of blood, and her complexion was deathly pale. "You!" Elder Qingyi stared at Ren Yufeng in front of her. "What kind of sorcery is this?" Ren Yufeng looked at the scene in front of him with satisfaction, and walked forward step by step. "Who told you it was a devil path spell? I'm the son of the divine dragon. This is a divine dragon secret technique." Divine dragon secret technique? Elder Qingmiao regained her senses and glared at him. "Your whole body is covered in devil aura, yet you still dare to say you're the son of the divine dragon? Shameless. You!" Ren Yufeng raised his hand again, his face full of anger. Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao were on guard at the same time. Their defensive magic weapons were shattered, and they weren't rich cultivators, so they could only reluctantly take out defensive talismans. Ren Yufeng didn't use devil aura to attack like before. Instead, he smiled strangely. It'd be a pity if I didn't let you experience it. Experience what? Before Imotinga could guess what he meant, Ren Yufeng stretched out his hand and shouted, "Rise!" In an instant, Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao turned pale with fright. The remaining devil aura around their bodies suddenly surged as if it was alive. The devil aura slowly swam towards them, entwined around their bodies. Elder Qingyi and Elder Qingmiao were astonished. They took a step back, but the devil aura took a step forward. They wanted to use their spiritual aura to force the devil aura away, but the devil aura easily penetrated their defenses. Senior Martial Sister. Elder Qingmiao was a bit flustered. Although Elder Qingyi was a bit calmer, her injuries were much more serious, so she couldn't do what she wanted. The devil aura was getting closer and closer, almost invading their bodies. They could already feel the strangeness of this devil aura. It was gloomy, cold, lifeless, and it made their blood run cold. Senior Martial Sister, what's this? Elder Qingyi's complexion was pale, but her eyes were filled with shock. This is dead aura, dead aura. I know. Dead aura? Imotinga was stunned. There was also some black aura around her body, and now, she was also moving towards her. Yes, this person cultivates dead aura. It absorbs the dead aura of dead people. No wonder there were always disciples missing these days. They were probably used to cultivate this evil technique. Elder Qingmiao also knew what dead aura was, so her complexion instantly turned pale. Dead aura was actually a kind of special spiritual aura. Mortals called life aura yang aura, and dead aura yin aura. But in fact, the cultivation world didn't think so. Life aura had both yin and yang, and most people's life auras revolved around yin and yang. However, dead aura was different. It was neither part of the 5 elements nor outside of yin and yang. Therefore, people couldn't come into contact with dead aura. Once they came into contact with dead aura, they would slowly be corroded and eventually lose their lives, becoming dead people. As the name implied, dead aura was the aura that could only exist in dead people. Nowadays, the righteous path and the devil path had been separated for too long, so no one knew whether the devil path could cultivate dead aura or not. However, they knew it was absolutely impossible for the righteous path to cultivate dead aura. Senior Martial Sister. Elder Qingmiao was a bit panicked. What should we do? Elder Qingyi wasn't much better than her, but she was a bit calmer now. After thinking about it, she clenched her teeth and said, "Dante on real fire. Dead aura is afraid of fire." However, Ren Yufeng was still in front of them. How could they find the time to refine the dead aura invading their bodies? Senior Martial Sisters. Unexpectedly, Elder Qingxi came out. Her complexion was pale, and her body was floating. Obviously, her spiritual aura hadn't recovered yet. "I'll stop him." Junior Martial Sister Qingxi. Elder Qingxi didn't say anything. A flower basket appeared in her hands. The fresh flowers in the basket looked like they were just plucked. Their fragrance assailed everyone's nostrils. Humph. Ren Yufeng didn't take Elder Qingxi seriously at all. He sneered and devil aura started to wander around his fingers. With a heavy expression, Elder Qingxi put her hand into the flower basket and sprinkled a handful of petals. These petals were obviously light, but they carried raging spiritual aura as they drifted towards Ren Yufeng's face. With a sullen expression, Ren Yufeng raised his hand and devil aura gathered between his fingers. As soon as the petals came into contact with the devil aura, they were unexpectedly corroded and turned black in an instant. Elder Qingxi's expression changed. "You! Ha 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 ha!" Ren Yufeng threw his head back and laughed. "You overestimate yourself." He waved his sleeve, causing a gust of black aura to rush out and wrap around Elder Qingxi. "Ah!" Elder Qingxi cried out in pain, and the flower basket in her hands fell to the ground. Upon seeing this, Imotinga steeled her heart and pointed at the space between her eyebrows. If the 3 elders couldn't stop him, she'd lose her life in vain, so she'd better escape into the virtual sky world to hide for a while. The bead between her eyebrows shone. She chanted an incantation and shot out a spiritual aura. In an instant, she was submerged by the light. The light soon dispersed. Imotinga thought she was already inside the virtual sky world, but the next moment, she was shocked. She was still in the same place. She didn't enter the virtual sky world. What was wrong with her? Emotinga's face was deathly pale. She pointed at the space between her eyebrows again and summoned the bead. The bead was still shining, but after she cast the incantation, there was still no reaction. She suddenly panicked. Why couldn't she enter the virtual sky world? This was her last life-saving method. What could she do if she couldn't enter? Suddenly, she felt pain in her arm. She looked down and saw the faintly discernible dead aura wrapped around it. Dead aura. This dead aura destroyed her body of origin, so her body couldn't form a primal chaos. So she couldn't open the virtual sky world. But now, the three elders obviously couldn't hold on anymore. With Ren Yufeng's current twisted personality, he definitely wouldn't spare her life. What should I do? What should I do? Emotinga broke out in a cold sweat as she watched the scene before her. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.